Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is the boy in the team in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 46, The Shattering of Normality. Shiku's eyes closed as the soothing sensation of healing chakra washed over him. The medic Nin worked quickly, closing the wounds from his front and back. The fatigue would remain, but at least he wouldn't be bleeding out. He returned up in the contestants' box to a tackling hug from Nariko. Yosh! I knew you could do it, Shin-chan. Nariko exclaimed. I knew it. Congratulations, Kabuto said with a smile. I can't wait to challenge you in the arena. Ah, likewise, Kabuto-san, Shinku replied awkwardly. The only genin that remained in the contestant box belonged to Konoha. Now that Shinku looked around Nariko, Sasuke, Shino, Kabuto, and him. It appears a Konoha genin will win this tournament. Why do I say this? Because there are only Konoha genin left. Minato Namikaze smiled, before turning to gaze at the Mizukage. Yagura merely scoffed, rolling his eyes while holding his coral staff with both of his hands. I still nominate Kojuro as a Chiryunin, the light green-haired man with the youthful face said crisply, his dull eyes settling on his bodyguard next. Mei nodded, scribbling down on a small piece of parchment the name. The matches will now begin again. Hate exclaimed, taking a mental notice to buy some earmuffs for the next time around. Nariko-tan! Nariko-tan! The arena's walls trembled as roars of Sasuke-sama mixed with Nariko-tan. The flags waved faster than before, the crowd excited at the upcoming battle. Both Nariko and Sasuke descended into the arena in a flicker, taking their spots one in front of the other. Hate raised his hand. The moment it went down, both contestants flickered off. Sparks sailed in the air as Kunao met Kunao, while volleys of shuriken sliced the ground. There were gouts of flames in a corner and then a volley of clones popped in another. It was a completely different level from the battles before. The Raise-Non appeared in Nariko's hand just as the Susanoo sprouted from Sasuke's body, deadening the otherwise lethal technique. They are showing off their techniques rather than actually aiming at defeating one another, Shino replied. Why do I say this? Sasuke Uchiha has not used the main Jakyu to end the fight with a Genjutsu. Well, one of the two will have to go to the finals, Kabuto exhaled. I do not know how they will solve us being uneven, however, maybe they'll have us go another bout and hold the elimination before the final. Wouldn't that be problematic? Shinku murmured back. I mean, someone would have to fight twice. As Nariko shattered the ground with a fist, the three normal genin winced at the same time, albeit Shino hid his behind his sunglasses. I think it will be indifferent, because whoever is picked for a rematch will surrender. Why do I say so? Because the chance is high of picking either Namikaze-san or Uchiha-san. Shinku gazed at the ground of the arena slowly turning into a wasteland of broken earth and self-combusting fires. He shuddered. He wasn't going down there against either Nariko or Sasuke. He understood what Shino meant. If someone ended up with either of the two as their rematch, he wouldn't survive. They're prolonging the match to show off all their tricks, Kabuto remarked dryly. I think I will surrender in the finals, if I get there. Likewise, Shino said. Ah, Shinku blearily gazed at Nariko's punch deflected by Sasuke, who returned another to the girl's face. I think I'll go down fighting. Why? Because otherwise, I think my teammates would kill me, Shinku chuckled nervously. Well, not in the literal sense but... I see, Shino acquiesced. Shinku blinked when he saw Nariko give him the thumb up from the arena, strangely followed by Sasuke before the two returned to fighting one another. Shino saw the gesture however, and turned his head towards Shinku. How did you manage to become friends with Namikaze-san? She is an extremely reserved person. I'll kick your ass all the way to Uzushio, team. Nariko screamed as if on cue from the arena's floor. I don't think she's reserved, Shinku winced as another fist sailed the air, she looks the opposite of reserved. Ah, but I have never managed a conversation with her. Why do I say this? Because I tried and failed multiple times to talk with her. I was curious as to why she reacted with hostility towards Hinata, but I never managed to speak with her to find out why. I think it has something to do with the Hyuga Uchiha diatribe, but I cannot be certain. What Hyuga Uchiha diatribe? Shinku mumbled, perplexed. You do not know. Shino inclined his head to the side. Of course it would not be fine for the daughter of the Hokage to have as an exclusive friend only the son of the Uchiha clan. There are many other influential clans in Konoha, and in order not to enmity one or another, Namikaze-san used to spend time equally with every other clan children. Shino took a moment of silence to catch his breath. I do not know what happened next, however. Suddenly, she stopped visiting the other clan compounds except for the Uchiha house. Shinku remained silent. Why don't you ask her when she comes back up? Kabuto hazarded. She might answer. Proctor, I would like to, sir. OHI. Nope. I would like to surrender. Naruko yelled at the same time of Sasuke. Hate's shoulders dropped, before he turned to gaze upwards to where the Hokage was. Minato Namikaze's right eyebrow twitched. Fine, he acquiesced. The brats are abusing the fact they know they're strong enough to be promoted to Chunin, he muttered. Hey. Mark it down as a draw. Both are out of the exam then. The roars in the crowds grew to the point of requiring the shinobi present on the scene to calm down the spirits. Sasuke and Naruko both clapped hands, before heading off shoulder to shoulder towards the medic nins. I would have totally won without the awesome sparring rules, Sasuke grumbled. Yeah, Naruko rolled her eyes. You know I can fight blind anyway. I just hate relying on smell and fuzzy butts. You realize we now have to go back in and cheer for Shinku until he wins the tournament, right? Sasuke stated plainly. Course. Team 7's awesome that way, Naruko nodded. And this way, when I'll grow old and weary, I'll tell my grandchildren of the day Shin-chan won the tournament while Yuki-chan watched with awe and his panties wet. Sasuke's fist hit the girl's head. Oh we. Naruko whined. You don't hit girls. I'm not hitting a girl, I'm hitting the stupid out of your body, he retorted. Back in the arena, Hate nodded mentally to himself as he held the small radio close to his ear. Having received instructions on how to proceed, he gestured for the three remaining contestants to descend. Shino Abarame, Kabuto Yakushi, and Shinku Harano, the proctor said. Come down on the ring, all three of you. Well, Kabuto said, holding up his smile, it's time. Hate took out 3 small cards from his pocket, as the 3 genin stopped near him. Pick one, the 2 cards of the same number will fight first and the uneven one will go last. Shino picked first, soon followed by Kabuto and Shinku. His card was a rendition of the Iwagaku cage, bloodthirsty and holding a heart in his hand. Those of you who picked the cage card remain. The one who got the Jounin card has to go back in the contestant box. Shinku exhaled. This was it. He gazed at the other 2 genin, hoping against all odds it wouldn't be. Kabuto remained. Shino leisurely walked back up in the contestant box. Shinku sighed. So he was up against the older genin. He didn't know if it was better than the Abarame and its bugs, but at least he now was sure that if worse came to worse, he wouldn't lose covered in crawling creatures. Kabuto pushed his glasses back up from the tip of his nose, holding up his smile. Shinku awkwardly gave back a smile of his own. Good luck, Harano-kun. Gee, good luck to you too, Yakushi-san. The match between Shinku Harano and Kabuto Yakushi will now begin. Both contestants, fight. In that instant, a terrifying explosion rocked throughout Konoha. Shinku stumbled, as suddenly his eyes went wide. Was he already in a genjutsu? No, even Kabuto looked surprised. The arena's walls cracked and broke, large chunks fell down as a massive snake poured through with its giant maws. Was he hallucinating? How? When? Why? Who? What? The people in the stands screamed in fear, Harano-kun. Watch out! Kabuto yelled, just as the giant snake slid forward with a terrifying speed, ignoring him as if he were but a speck of dust. Shinku felt his entire body pulled away as the yellow flash of Konoha took to the field. He watched the spot he had been before, where now the snake had trudged through, leaving behind a long line in the ground. The Hokage's bodyguards appeared right next to him a moment later, their gazes narrow and already armed to their teeth. Shinku's feet touched the ground of the arena's balcony, the Hokage dropping him to turn towards the assembled shinobi. Get the people into the shelters. Minato barked, your top priority is the escort of civilians into the bunkers. Don't delude me now, shinobi of Konoha. Hi. Shinku stuttered out, his exclamation drowned by the stronger hi from the other shinobi present. The yondaime flashed away. Kakashi flickered down from his spot just as the yondaime sailed the air, slamming a raise-non into the giant snake and sending the creature to fly backwards before it exploded in smoke. Naruko and Sasuke were next to him in a flash, soon followed by both Fu and Yojao. Fu gripped tightly on his arm, looking at him with worry clearly etched on her face. I'm fine, he mouthed. Fu nodded, holding up a bubbly smile a moment later. We can take care of getting the civilians in the shelter, Kakashi said to the other Jounin among who was the leader of Team 10. You lot can sweep the area around the planned escape route. There were nods. Apparently Kakashi was high enough in the hierarchy that he automatically assumed command and then flickers as everyone went. How are your chakra reserves? The silver-haired Jounin asked. Anyone needs a soldier pill, now's the moment. Naruko shook her head. I'm fine and ready for 100 clones and more. I'll take one if the situation warrants it, Sasuke replied. I'm fine, Shinku acquiesced. Very well, Kakashi nodded. Naruko, you go up ahead and round up any civilian who left the pre-planned escape route. Use the Kage Bunshin, but don't try to engage the enemy shinobi. Yojao? You go with her. Kakashi turned towards Fu, you take the right flank while Sasuke, you'll take the left one. Shinku and I will take the rear. Kakashi exhaled. Do not pursue enemy shinobi. Always remain in visual contact with the civilian column and make sure they reach the shelters. If they end up too far from the column, do not try to pursue them, unless you're Naruko and can spare a Kage Bunshin. Naruko puffed her chest out. Now let's move. Atop a nearby rooftop, Zabuza stood to the side of Yagura and Mei. I always wanted a snake wallet, he remarked dryly, gazing at the giant snakes rampaging through the city. Can I get one? No, Yagura replied. They are summons. You will not manage to get a snake skin from them. If I'm fast enough I will, Zabuza replied. Mizukage-sama, should we intervene? We do not have an alliance with the Leaf, Yagura remarked. Defend yourself if attacked, otherwise acquire Kojuro and wait for the siege to end. The Kaze Cage is already helping Konoha, another cage is unneeded. Zabuza grumbled, I still want my snakeskin wallet. Yagura simply gazed at the swordsman of the mist with a neutral and half-dead look. That snake offends my morals, he pointed at a twin-headed flame-spouting snake. Go and get him. Thanks boss, I knew you were the best. And with that, Zabuza charged off with his butcher's cleaver in hand. Like dealing with a little kid, Yagura muttered, shaking his head slowly. Shinku was gripping at straws. He watched the people move, but they were moving too slow. A snake slithered its way through the buildings, crumbling them down, as it seemed on a collision course with the column. Sasuke jumped in midair, the Susanu's arms halting the snake's advance with a chakra sword gutting the beast and making it disappear in a puff of smoke. Fu controlled large clouds of insects on her side, and just like fleas on a mangy mutt, they swarmed and surrounded another snake that had been moving too close. To the left, crumbled building. Kakashi exclaimed as Shinku's eyes darted in that direction. There was a child crying, a limb stuck beneath the rubble. He jumped down from the rooftop, one of his arms surrounding the little boy's shoulder as the other pushed the rock away. He'd probably hold onto a bleeding stump of a left foot for a while, but he didn't know first aid. The boy's tiny arms gripped tightly on his neck. He couldn't be more than 5 or 6 and he wailed in his ears, making them ring. The moment he jumped back on the rooftop, holding on to the child, Kakashi eyed him sourly. You have to hand him over to a civilian in the column. You can't properly protect someone if your hands are busy. Shinku winced from the harsh tone, before jumping down once more. A burly man who probably was a construction worker wordlessly understood and gripped the boy out of his hold. Shinku mouthed a thanks, before heading back up. His breathing was starting to become ragged. The shelters are in the Hokage monument, Kakashi muttered. We're not far from them, the silver-haired Jounin looked around. But something's wrong in this picture. Shinku bit his lips. He didn't know if his parents were fine or not. He hoped they were, but as it was, he didn't have the time to check. If they had been in the arena, then they were in the column heading towards the shelters. If they weren't, he just hoped they were. Another summon puffed off in smoke as four Naruto Cage Bunshin all punched it in the head at the same time, screaming Databia to the top of their lungs. Meanwhile, standing atop a toad, Minato Namikaze stared at Orochimaru, who was apparently looking at his nails with a bored expression, himself standing on a giant purple snake. "You're surrounded by all sides." Minato yelled, "I don't know what madness took you, Orochimaru, but you have a lot to answer for." The snake Sunin snorted. "Minato, Minato, Minato," the Sunin shook his head. So pitiful, he snapped his fingers. An explosion rocked the air, as the academy evaporated into nothingness. Minato's guts clenched as he watched the building's crumbling remains from his spot, his eyes wide. "Now, let us make an educated guess," Orochimaru continued. "What other buildings, very important buildings, did Orochimaru infiltrate?" "I would say the waterworks, the hospital, the artisan district." The Sunin began to count them off with the tip of his fingers: the Hokage Tower, the Hokage Mansion, the arena. How about a deal, Minato-kun?" Orochimaru's golden eyes shone lightly. "The Forbidden Scroll, hand it over and I'll leave without making another peep, or blowing up another building." Minato ground his teeth. "As if you could have infiltrated all of those places." Orochimaru inclined his head to the side. The man smiled, and then he snapped his fingers once more. The hospital burst up in flames, the upper and lower level detonating as it crumbled down in a mountain of dust. "Oh my," Orochimaru exclaimed to the ashen face of the Hokage, "I sure hope they evacuated that building in time." "Sir," Rado muttered. "Give us the order, and we'll take him down." There were over a dozen of Umbu surrounding them, but Minato clenched his fists. This wasn't a simple matter of dealing with Orochimaru. How did you?" "I had help from a friend who's good with explosives," Orochimaru smiled. "So, ready to bargain?" "I will not hand over the Forbidden Scroll to you, Orochimaru," Minato hissed. "Oh? Not even if I tell you I have a hostage?" The man's smile widened. "Uchiha Sasuke, he has my brand, doesn't he? Did you know that, unless he comes by my side within the next years, he'll die? I got around to properly modifying the injection of the cursed seal, you know, and slowly but surely, it will consume his mind and soul." Minato ground his teeth. "That's a lie if I ever heard." Orochimaru shrugged. "I hold hostage your city, a precious specimen of Uchiha, and have torn apart your defenses. What is more important, Namikaze? The Forbidden Scroll, or your people?" Orochimaru's lips parted to show a smile. "You have 5 minutes to decide." "For the yellow flash, it's a lot, isn't it?" Minato palmed two three-pronged kunai. "I can always stop you, Orochimaru." "Oh, but you see," Orochimaru gripped at the sides of his face. "I'm not even here to begin with." The mask pulled away, to reveal a shinobi from sound with a radio on the side of his ear. "Orochimaru-sama sends his regards," the shinobi stated plainly. "Deliver the scroll to me, the countdown has begun." To those words, Minato's shoulders began to tremble in ill-conceived rage. Shinku jumped sideways, avoiding a tail swipe from an angry-looking snake. The golden eyes of the beast were fixated on him, its jaws open and its tongue vibrating. Bits and pieces of rubble hit him in the back as he kept on running, jumping on a nearby wall and using it as a trampoline to reach another rooftop. He landed and rolled on the roof, sweat rolling down his forehead to the side of his chin. His jacket filled with dust from the destroyed building, but everything was fine. The giant snakes were dangerous, and out of his league, but they also appeared to be dwindling in numbers. He heard the sound of the rakery, before Kakashi plowed through the beast, turning it into smoke as he landed right next to Shinku. The column began marching again, the scare from the snake speeding them up quite a bit. The Hokage's monument came into view after a few minutes. The shinobi of Konoha forced the civilians to enter slowly, to avoid people dying from the resulting chaos of bodies pushing bodies. The first explosion tore through Shinku's eardrums as his eyes widened in shock. It took him a moment to realize that the academy was gone, a crater now standing in its place. Kakashi's lone eye widened considerably. Next was the hospital, crumbling down like a card castle. Kakashi-sensei. Shinku murmured, his palms trembling. What is going on? It appears Konoha was infiltrated beforehand, the silver-haired Jounin replied. But, how could no one realize? Storage seals, Kakashi whispered. All it takes is a bit of ink, and an explosive already primed to detonate within storage. The moment the shinobi calls the explosive out of storage, it detonates. It's a common booby trap and nobody would find it strange. Shinku's eyes closed as the boy let out a shuddering breath. What if the shelters have been infiltrated? He asked, his voice dangerously low. Let's hope not, Kakashi murmured, there's half the population of Konoha in there, and if bombs detonated, the monument would come crashing down. It would be a carnage. Shouldn't we warn the people? If we do that, we'll incite panic. Do you understand what it would mean if those inside tried to run out while those outside tried to enter? They'd probably kill each other. Shinku took another breath. But if they did infiltrate the shelters, and if nobody warns them, there will be more casualties, Kakashi nodded. The point is, there are protocols in place. Unless 5 Umbu squads are wrong, then the shelters are clean. Of course, nothing prevents Orochimaru from having placed explosives in a short interval of merely 30 minutes, but if that were the case then the point of letting them leave would probably be moot now, would it? Do you think my parents are? I didn't check, but you'd have better luck asking Naruko. As if speaking of the devil, the girl and Yojao-sensei appeared by their sides then. The Jounin guarding the entrance to the shelters will take it from here, the woman said crisply. Are you all right? She gazed at Shinku softly, who nodded back. Naruko. Shinku hazarded, have you seen my parents? Naruko blinked. Shin-chan, I said you have to call me Naru-chan didn't I? The most beautiful Naru-chan in the world would be fine too, but anyway yep. Your mother I think it was your mother anyway, I only saw her in a photo was in the civilian column. Your father probably wasn't far. Probably. Shinku dreaded that probably. Well, duh, he would have come too, right? Shinku gazed towards the artisan district. Sensei. All right, Kakashi exhaled. Since we did escort the civilian column to the shelters, we can begin swiping the village for anyone we might have missed. If you find any civilians along the way I want you to round them with the cage bunshin technique, Naruko. Naruko nodded, giving a worried glance towards Shinku. Kakashi just smiled, before signaling Sasuke and Fu to follow them. Shinku ran from rooftop to rooftop, ignoring the pain he felt to his sides or the burning of his lungs. Shin-chan, slow down. Naruko yelled. You're going to exhaust yourself. One more roof and his parents' bakery would come into view. One more roof, that wasn't there. He stumbled, falling down towards the ground face first. Naruko gripped him by the scruff of the neck, changing his trajectory and making the landing smoother. Shin-chan. She yelled. I told you to slow down, didn't I? Shinku looked ahead. Shinobi of various ranks were working like ants, carrying away large chunks of stone from the buildings and extracting what survivors they could. Many were ashen-faced, while a few of the survivors stood unresponsive to the side, their bodies covered in the dust of the crumbling buildings. His eyes found the familiar form of her mother, standing deathly still in front of a pile of rubble and wood. She was gazing in the direction where the bakery was supposed to be, but there were only ruins. Mom. He croaked out, nearing his mother's still form. Mom. He asked again, but she didn't reply. Where's Dad? He whispered out. 1 minute, Mabuki whispered back. I'll turn off the oven in 1 minute. Stupid man, stupid workaholic of a man. She hiccuped, I told him to move it, and he just laughed. He pushed me outside, and then it all fell on him, she sniffled. He's still down there. Shinku dashed for the ruins, his hands gripping at the large chunks of rock as he pushed and pulled them away frantically. It was a matter of moments before Yojao gripped at his shoulders, pulling him away. No. Let me go. Let me go. He shrieked, trying to break free from the iron grip of his sensei. Calm down. Yojao muttered, holding him. Shinku, calm down. He flailed, trying to reach for the rubble to move it once more. "Ohi Shin-chan, you're bleeding," Nariko yelled, moving closer to her teammate. The puddle of red dribbled down his back and bled through towards Yojao's own armor, leaving behind a blotch. "It's nothing important," he hissed back. I'm fine. Let me go, please." "You most certainly are not," Yojao replied, palming a soldier pill. "Chew on this." She handed it over to Shinku, who obeyed absent-mindedly. The rest of the team came around just as he returned closer to his mother, who still appeared in shock. "You said she was in the shelter, Dobe," Suzuki hissed. Nariko winced. "What happened?" "I wasn't sure." She mumbled back. "Shin-chan's dad didn't make it," the girl added. Fu was about to head over, a look of concern over her face, when Yojao gently grabbed her by the shoulders. "Now," the woman continued, eyeing the rest of Team 7. "Let's keep on looking around for survivors, while we give Shinka the time to grieve with his family, all right?" Nariko nodded warily, before giving one last look towards the direction of Shinku and his mother. They all began to help around, carrying rubble, bringing out survivors, corpses. "Shinku," Mabuki whispered calmly. "I want you out of the house by tomorrow, if the place still stands." Shinku's eyes widened. Mom. This is your entire fault," she murmured. "If you hadn't been born, if you weren't so useless, if you were the girl I always wanted, then your father would still be alive," she hissed. "It's your fault, you wanted this to happen, didn't you? You wanted me to die too, but I didn't." That's not. "I want you out of the house by tomorrow," Mabuki whispered once more. "I don't care where you go, you stupid insufferable egoistic child, go to Taki or die in a fire, just get out of my sight and never come back." Shinku didn't reply. He just began to walk. There were people he could help around the place. There was no need to remain there after all, not in a place that didn't want him to begin with. Meanwhile, Minato clasped the forbidden scroll in his hands. Grabbing it had been a simple matter of using the Hiraishin technique. The shinobi in front of him simply gazed with dull eyes ahead. "If you take this, you swear to leave without blowing anything else up?" the Yondaime Hokage asked, his gaze narrow as if to catch any possible hint of a lie. "If it's the real forbidden scroll, then of course," the shinobi replied, relaying Orochimaru's words. The Umbu all tensed, but didn't mutter a word. This was the Hokage's decision, not theirs. "What of Suzuki?" Minato pressed on. "I didn't lie," Orochimaru's lackey smiled. "He can either come to me or die in a few years. I'm not going to hand him over to the likes of you," Minato hissed. "I want the cure." "There isn't one," the shinobi replied. "Not being bitten would have probably worked out fine, but unfortunately that is now out of the question, isn't it?" "I understand," Minato growled. "I'll have Tsunade and Jiraiya look into it." "Let them try, they won't be able to do anything," Orochimaru's lackey smiled even wider. "Now, hand over the scroll, Hokage-sama." Minato flung the scroll, which the enemy shinobi grabbed tightly. The sound ninja nodded after checking its authenticity, before the snake he stood upon began to slither away. "Do not pursue if you value what little remains of your village," he yelled back. "Hokage-sama," one of the Umbu said warily, waiting for an order to strike just like his colleagues. "No, let him go," Minato replied softly. "Check the mentioned spots. Check every inch of the village, now." Slowly, the siege situation winded down as the last of the snakes puffed in smoke and disappeared. Shinku's breath evened out as he collapsed against a wall. The sun was slowly dying out, and as he wiped away the sweat from his forehead, he heard the typical noise of chakra wings coming down close to him. "Shinku-kun?" Fu asked, getting down on one knee next to him. "Are you all right?" Shinku nodded weakly. "Just tired," he murmured back. "What's the problem?" he asked back, raising his head to meet the girl's concerned gaze. Fu shook her head. "Nothing," she dropped her head against his shoulder, before jumping slightly back. "Ouch," she massaged her cheek slowly, warily eyeing the offending appendage. Shinku chuckled lightly, tapping the reinforced shoulder. "I don't think it's a comfortable place to take a nap." Fu pouted for a moment and then straddled his lap, turning around and dropping her head just below his chin. He could feel the wound on his back burn a bit, but he ignored the feeling. He felt at ease. He was without a home to return to, but in that moment, he was at ease. His arms crossed around Fu's waist. The girl giggled. "Will you come and visit me in Taki soon?" "As soon as I can," Shinku mumbled. "Maybe after this is over," he added. "I think Konoha will need all the men it can spare for a while." Fu's eyes softened considerably, before she closed them and began to hum a little lullaby. Meanwhile, just a few rooftops nearby, the rest of Team 7 convened. "Situation?" Kakashi asked. "I sent Fu," Yojao replied dryly. "How are we?" "I was talking about the survivors," the Jounin replied with a sharp glare. "Concerning Shinku anyway, for now we do nothing," Kakashi stated plainly. "We wait and see. If he wants to talk about it, if he wants to share the burden, then we act. There's no need to treat him like a sick child. He's a shinobi." "Kakashi nii? Is there really nothing we can do?" Naruko muttered. "Like, a hug? Hugs work, right?" Sasuke remained silent. "He's already getting the hugs," he gestured with his head towards the forms of Shinku and Fu. "And a few kisses in there too." Naruko slammed a fist on Sasuke's head. "No Manjikure recording," she snapped. "I wasn't planning to." Sasuke shot back. Yeah, duck butt." Naruko's eyes narrowed. "I'm keeping an eye on you," she moved her face closer, "a really good eye on you." "Enough," Kakashi snapped. "They'll probably start to empty the shelters soon enough. If you have the energies to banter, you have the strength to help around. There are people dying as we speak." The two genin both stiffened at the stern lecture. "I know you're both exhausted," Kakashi added softly, "but unless you're wounded, try to make yourself helpful to the people around you." The sound of wings fluttering caught Kakashi's ears, as Fu descended with Shinku in tow nearby. Naruko made a lecherous snicker, which turned Shinku's face slightly red. "Very well," Kakashi said, "if we're done taking pauses." Shinku said nothing, but brought his gaze down in shame. "The key word is to help around as much as possible. Until you're too tired to even stand, help whoever you can. It will keep your mind off thinking too much." Shinku's eyes widened briefly, before he grimaced and nodded to those words particularly jabbed in his direction. By the time he collapsed on a dingy mattress laid on the ground of the nearby tent area, he didn't have any thought lingering through his brain at all. He was simply too tired to care. He didn't even wonder about the tournament's results. If he had passed, or not, they would tell him, eventually, he hoped. Inner exhaled, gripping a kunao tightly and turning towards the quivering mass of screams and nightmares that poured through the gaps. "I hate overworking," he mumbled, "I hate it." Shinku's sleep wasn't plagued by a single nightmare that night. Then again, he hadn't slept much to begin with. Chapter 47, Sorting Out Problems. Shinku woke up to the noises of the tent camp coming to life. The realization of where he was and what the long day ahead of him had in wait made his face blanch carefully. His body moved automatically, his muscles and bones creaked under the strain of the hard night he had gone through. He felt as if he hadn't slept a wink. A tired side of him yawned into his mind as it finally succumbed to sleep. Even though the siege had been very short, there still were casualties and missing people. A makeshift wooden panel stood at the center of the camp, holding on to photos and names. "Takeo, if you read this, I'm in tent B45. Have you seen this girl?" Another message went, scribbled furiously with shaky strokes. A table nearby had a long line of people actually writing their messages, before carefully pinning them to the wooden panel. He looked around, trying to find something to do, anything, really. Shinku neared a stiff-looking medicnin, who was barking out orders right and left. "We need more water. Bring more to boiling point already. Try to find out if they scavenged some supplies from the hospital's ruins. There are lives at risk here. Can I help?" Shinku asked, as the man turned towards him. "Yes. Listen, I need you to head over to the hospital and check if they got out something. Any storage scroll will do since we're strapped with the emergency supplies." The medicnin turned to bark another order. "Bring them back here as fast as you can, understood?" Shinku nodded and was off. He knew where the hospital was. If anything, he was literally at home in the place most of the time. Walking through the destruction, he didn't waste a moment looking around and simply passed quickly past the working shinobi. The rebels of the hospital greeted him after a few minutes of walking. It was early in the morning, but some shinobi were still hard at work bringing out corpses from the rubble and moving things to the side. The black plastic bags that lined up the nearby ground were too many to count, and more than a few seemed only half filled. "You done sightseeing?" A gruff voice snapped him back towards the closest shinobi, an umbu wearing a bear mask. "You found any medical supplies or storage scrolls?" "The guys at the tent camp could use them now," Shinku replied. "We've got to check them for time-delayed explosives," the umbu replied. "You want to help, go swap with one of the guys down there. They've been at it all night digging out the bodies." He gestured towards the line of shinobi with sunken eyes and bleeding hands, "and they could use some rest." He did just that. That was how Kakashi found him. He found him carrying out of the rubble a small and squishy blanket-covered thing that he cradled in his arms. The silver-haired Jounin didn't say a word as he watched the boy hand over the corpse to the nearby medic Nin, who grimly shook his head and placed it inside another black bag. It was just another half-filled black bag. Kakashi gave a nod to Bear, before moving towards Shinku and dropping a hand on his shoulder. "You all right in there?" "They're digging the maternity ward out," Shinku replied quietly. That's the fifth body I found." "You're requested in the Hokage's office," Kakashi said calmly, his voice neither carefree nor concerned. "You caught some shut-eye?" "Yes," he nodded. "Not much, but some." They began to walk towards the tower, Shinku's eyes downcast. They were, shouldn't there? "The hospital blew up too fast to do anything," Kakashi replied. "It blew from below and from above. There was no way out but flinging oneself out from the sides just in time, and with the speed the explosion occurred only a shinobi with extremely fast reflexes would have managed such a feat. The maternity ward where the children are kept does not have windows to begin with." The man looked up to the sky. "We were lucky. There weren't many births this month." "It was the fifth body," Shinku replied softly. "I once dug out a pregnant woman from some rubble, in a small village across the border with Iwa. A rock lance had skewered her from side to side in her stomach. It was disgusting to even watch," Kakashi replied calmly, "but you grow jaded to it. There's just so much sick you can take before you simply stop caring." "Should we really stop caring?" "Yes, you both should," Kakashi said. "I can't say I understand what your mind rambles on about, but you can't stop death from happening. When it comes, it comes. You can only watch until it's your turn. You don't seem to care much about us being us. I've seen stranger things. Like a grown man wearing a bright green spandex, going around screaming about the fires of youth," Kakashi deadpanned back. "I have seen the horrors of barbed wire sticking into the skin of crying children my same age, clawing at it and digging themselves just a deeper pit in the mud to choke in their own blood," he added. "You never forget the screams, the bodies, the blood or the feeling of the rain sticking to your skin as you watch the ground turn to mud and the blood slowly slither its way towards your own hole. Is that why you hate the rain?" "Among other things," Kakashi chuckled. "It always rains when something bad happens to me," the man shrugged. The moment Shinku opened the door of the Hokage office, he was grabbed by a fast orange and green blur that made his head spin until something was pushed down around his body and his armor. "Shin-chan! We did it! We all did it!" Naruko exclaimed loudly, and the moment his eyes stopped spinning Shinku realized what was going on. His jacket now had green on it. His dark brown and red jacket now had green on it. He had green. He had the flak jacket. He had the jacket. He, the dead last of the academy, had the jacket. He had the jacket. The jacket was his. He had it. He was a Chunin. He had the jacket. The jacket. The jacket was his. "Breathe," Sasuke said next to him. "You're hyperventilating," the boy added. "Deep breaths," the Uchiha said while moving his head up and down to follow his own breathing. "OHI!" Naruko yelled, "You know what this calls for? A picture." She proceeded to summon from one of her storage seals a camera, before placing it on a nearby desk. You didn't do a Team 1 already? Minato asked. Kakashi chuckled nervously. I might have forgotten about it. Kakashi, Minato sighed, rolling his eyes as his lips twitched upwards. I'll take care of making the picture, Naruko. He gripped the camera from the desk. Now stand in formation with the back towards the village. Let's make it scenic while we're at it. Awkwardly, Shinku obeyed. He didn't know why, but he found himself standing in the middle. Soon, Naruko's arm crossed past his shoulders, while Sasuke did the same on the other side. Obeying a silent order, Shinku's arms both went past his teammates' shoulders. Kakashi dropped his own hands on the heads of Naruko and Sasuke, showing a smile through his mask. Sasuke made a small smirk in preparation for the picture. Naruko grinned widely. Shinku's lips parted in a small smile. The flash came, and the photo moment was done. Yes. Naruko blurred to grab the camera. Now we need one with the extended team. Where's Yojao-sensei and Fu-chan? Ah, Minato sighed. This is also the reason I called you here. We're currently short on manpower as I have the reserves deal with the aftermath of the siege. I'm giving out your official first B rank right this moment. You will have to escort some important dignitaries back to the capital, he added. Uzuki-san was reinstated in Umbu out of her own accord, he added softly, and Shibuki-san left first thing in the morning with Fu, refusing an escort. What? Sasuke yelled, his hands closing into fists as everyone gazed at the Uchiha as if he had grown a second head. What the hell? No. What about the glorious goodbye of the departed lovers? There had to be rose petals, and tears, and the sunset. Sasuke wailed. I had to see that. Why? Why? OHI, duck butt, Naruko muttered. You're scaring the hell out of me, she added. Shinku's lips twitched in a nervous smile. His eyes went to his right hand quietly. The back of the insect was a bright strawberry red. Well, at least, as long as he had that he knew she'd be alive. Depending on how things went, it wouldn't take much to be stationed in Taki. Therefore, while I normally would assign a team of full jounin, you will have to do, Minato's lips parted in a smile. I cannot stress the importance of the nobles and dignitaries to arrive whole and unscathed to the capital. Kakashi nodded. When are we leaving? I'm giving you 1 hour to collect what you might need. The nobles' carriages will be waiting at the northern gate. Kakashi hummed his agreement. You heard the Hokage, 1 hour, northern gate, don't be late. Right, Naruko mumbled. Dad's already getting rid of us, I know, she moved to leave. Can you remain behind for a moment, Shinku? The second the Hokage said that, a cold chill crept through the boy's spine. OHI, Naruko's eyes narrowed, stilling midway towards the door. What do you want with Shin-chan, Dad? That's a private matter, Minato Namikaze replied. Kakashi hummed a bit more. Wait outside. Naruko pouted. Fine. But if I hear Shin-chan cry, I'm breaking the door. Sasuke rolled his eyes. Let's go before you further embarrass yourself, Dobe. The Uchiha gave one soft look at Shinku and one hard and nigh murderous one at Kakashi, before pulling out his teammate. The door closed with a soft click, and Minato clasped his hands together. Your sensei forwarded to me an application to grant you entry in the Umbu evaluation stage, the Hokage said. As with all Umbu applications, the Hokage is the one who personally takes charge of evaluating the individual's skills and whether he or she is able-bodied for the training regime and course. Minato Namikaze's voice grew softer. Some trainees do die in the initial training regime, which is held in the Forest of Death for an entire month, the man exhaled. It is a long and grueling job, which requires unfaltering loyalty to the village and to the Hokage. He then turned towards Kakashi. Personally, I wouldn't allow this even in 1,000 years, considering how you're too young. Your sensei seems to disagree. Itaki Uchiha enrolled in Umbu when he was 10 and became captain at 13, Kakashi replied. I say my little soldier started late, if anything. Kakashi, Minato said just one word, but with enough heat in the tone to make the silver-haired jounin silent. There was a moment of awkward silence. It does not mean you will enter UMBU on a permanent basis, since it's the Hokage who decides the active numbers of UMBU operatives. It means you will be considered qualified for UMBU work however, and might be called to perform at any moment, Minato continued. I doubt UMBU is the place for you, he added, but ultimately, the choice is yours. UMBU is an extra, it doesn't change your team placement or the missions you will do with your team. It will insert you in a roster and grant you access to the UMBU facilities around Konoha and the location of the UMBU caches in the Land of Fire. The Yondaime caught his breath. It also means I might cut short your time in Taki, if you're still interested in being sent there. Minato's lips twitched upwards. After your Chiyunin christening B rank, I did plan on sending Team 7 to Takigakur. He inclined his head to gaze sideways at Kakashi. Provided nothing happens along the way that might cause a diplomatic accident. Kakashi sighed. How could I have known the young impressionable girl was the daimyo's favorite concubine? See, can I think about it? Shinku muttered quietly, didn't he know about this and? Of course, Minato nodded. Now that this is out of the way, there is another matter to deal with. The Yondaime thrummed his fingers on his desk. Do you have a place to stay? Shinku blinked. How? Kakashi hummed. I might have overheard. Shinku bristled, his eyes moving sharply towards Kakashi with a glare. You eavesdropped? Yep, Kakashi nodded. Kakashi just did what a normal sensei is meant to do, Shinku, Minato said, which is surprising, considering Kakashi is Kakashi, but it's the truth. Do you need a place to stay? I have to look at the apartments that are still standing and assign the empty rooms due to the situation at hand anyway, so now is the time, and I thought you didn't want to speak of this with your teammates present. Shinku warily nodded, why yes, I'll need a place. Very well, Minato rummaged through his desk's upper drawer. I already took the liberty of assigning it to you anyway, due to Kakashi's insistence. I am starting to suspect he acts like a sensei only when he has to scare me, the Hokage chuckled, before throwing a key with a piece of paper attached in Shinku's direction. The boy fumbled a moment, but managed to catch the key. He eyed it warily, before gazing at the paper that had both the street name and the number of the apartment written on it. If you need anything, Minato said, you know you just have to ask, right? Why? He croaked out. I mean, why is the Hokage? Inoichi asked me the same question, Minato replied with a smile on his lips. If you ever have any doubt on your true worth, know that very few people would have the same instinct of self-sacrifice that you possess. It's twice you saved my daughter's life by now, and that is a debt I can hardly ever repay. I was just. It doesn't change what you did, Shinku, Minato whispered softly. Frankly, the only reason Fugaku hasn't thanked you yet is because he hearing my daughter's words has a stick so big up his ass he'd need a lumberjack to cut it down to size. Shinku nodded, before grimacing. Did I really deserve the jacket? He asked in the end. Yes, Minato replied without a shred of doubt. Some people might whisper that it was favoritism, others might say you bought it, but it's not the truth. You earned that jacket the day you decided to place the well-being of your teammates above the rules and the regulations, the day you chose to do what had to be done rather than what was right, and, frankly, if anyone should actually be accused of being favorite, that would be Nariko, Minato sighed. She really isn't ready to lead a team. Kakashi chuckled. It's going to be fun to watch at least. Minato delivered a sour look towards Kakashi. While I enjoy making small talk, you should really start preparing. The trip to the capital will take a few days, you know. Shinku stood ramrod straight and nodded firmly, hi. And then he dashed out of the door. Minato's gaze settled on Kakashi. He isn't UMBU material, Kakashi. Oh no, I agree, Kakashi's eye twinkled. He isn't, but the other him? I would really enjoy seeing him in action. How's he taking everything? Minato mumbled. He'll be fine, sensei, Kakashi replied. He kicked a bit of a fuss at first but he accepted it pretty quickly. I'm sure there won't be any complications. Minato closed his eyes. For your own sake, I hope so. Kakashi flickered away. Minato groaned, and returned to the papers he now had to triple-check before signing. Shinku's house, strangely defying expectations, was still standing. He entered directly from the window of his room. Shinku didn't say a word as he collected his bags and pulled everything of his inside. If he was fast enough, he could drop everything in the new apartment and be done with it before the start of the mission. "OHI, Shin-chan." He froze at the voice. "Me and Duck Butt are ready." "What tea?" Naruko barreled in a moment later, soon followed by Sasuke. "Why are you packing all that stuff?" "It's just going to be a few days," she inclined her head. "And why aren't you using the seal scroll I gave you?" "I used it as a fire source when I got lost in Takigakure's underground cave," he replied dutifully. "And?" Sasuke snorted. "You didn't want to make a nuisance of yourself and didn't ask for another, right?" Shinku blinked, before nodding. "That's just like you," the Uchiha chuckled, shaking his head. "Naruko can make these things in a couple of hours. She has dozens stacked everywhere." He pointed at the girl who was rummaging through her pockets. "Really, I'm scared of using chakra in her room for fear of opening a storage seal with garbage inside." "OHI. My room is very clean." Naruko pouted. "It's always clean." "Because you seal everything in a storage seal, and then forget about it," Sasuke retorted. "One day those seals are going to fail and you'll wake up surrounded by garbage." "I won't," Naruko stuck out her tongue. "Well, let's see." She opened one of her storage scrolls, letting half a dozen cups of ramen yet to cook clatter on the floor. "Here you go, Shin-chan. Pour chakra in and it's done." Shinku dutifully obeyed. "I nearly forgot, I'll need some of your pants too." The boy stopped and gazed with perplexity at Naruko's lecherous gaze. The girl snickered. "You don't want a seal in your pocket? You can summon stuff from it and then suffer from the old. Is that a kunao or are you happy to see me joke?" "It's guaranteed to." Sasuke slammed a fist on Naruko's head. "More than punching you're stupid, I think I should use salt to exorcise it." "So, why are you emptying the room, Shin-chan?" Naruko asked with her voice carefree as she cracked her knuckles absent-mindedly. "I'm relocating," he replied quietly. "It's nothing to." A headbutt landed him on the floor wincing. "Now, Shin-chan, I told you once. I told you twice," Naruko gripped him by the scruff of the neck, "and I told you thrice. I dislike people who lie to themselves. You can come out with the problem, or I can get to the root of it through headbutts." "I don't have to tell you all of my problems," Shinku hissed back. "And this isn't a problem," he added, his hands gripping Naruko's arms. "So let me go," he said with his eyes narrow and stern. "OHI, murder-happy Shin-chan," Naruko growled back, "you don't get it, do you? It's not that you have to tell me your problems, it's that you should. We're teammates. We shoulder our problems together. You don't get to sulk alone. Really? Then why don't we start with your problems?" Shinku snarled back, "Little Miss Sunshine and Daisies can't stay in the same room as a Hyuga without starting to growl. I wonder why," he hissed. "What's your problem, The grip tightened to the point of making Shinku's neck painfully contract. "Yeah," Naruko mumbled suddenly, "I suppose, fair's fair." She looked at him, "But I don't want any more excuses from you, murder-happy Shin-chan. I tell you, you tell me," she said firmly. "And if you don't, I headbutt you again." "I'm all ears," Inner choked out. "Dope, you're suffocating him." Sasuke barked. Naruko opened her palms and shuddered. Sorry," she mumbled. Anyway," she clenched her hands in fists as Shinku massaged his throat. "Fine. You want to know? I'll tell ya." She brought her hands to her hips. "My problem with that bitch is that she's a filthy, little liar who doesn't care about making friends, but only about doing what her father tells her to do. If there's one thing I hate, it's people who lie to themselves, Shin-chan, and frankly, if you have to become my friend because your father says so and you don't like half the things I do but never have the balls to say so to my face," Naruko hissed, "then why the hell are you still my friend to begin with? You aren't my friend. It's simple." Naruko took a step forward. "Now it's your turn." "What? Only that?" Shinku replied with a snap, "You barely said anything." So the Hyuga lied to you and suddenly you want to rip her throat out. She didn't just lie, Nariko growled, she admitted she became friends with me because her father wanted to. It's different. Friends don't become friends because they're forced. They become friends when they like being with each other. So, you hate to death that girl because her father coerced her into becoming your friend. How screwed up is that way of thinking, Shinka retorted. Oh no, it's not, Nariko grumbled. I asked her, you know? I asked her if she would have been my friend even without her father's pressure. You know her answer? She shook her damn mousy head. If she hadn't been pushed, I probably wouldn't even know her frigging name. Nariko slammed her right foot on the floor, and you want to know something even funnier? That thieving, conniving, blind-looking bitch had the guts to try to tell me it was political. A scrawny shoddy whore telling me it was because of the clan that she had to play nice, Nariko smirked. I showed her playing nice. I don't care about being friends with people who think about politics. I'm not really that stupid, give me some credit, but my friends are mine. You don't get to mess with them as long as they're under my watch. If someone messes with Yuki-chan, I prank the culprit until he starts wishing to be dead. The sound team messed with you, and I taught them a lesson. It's simple murder, happy Shin-chan. You don't mess with my friends. So, now, what's your problem? You have some loose screws, Shinko deadpanned, really loose. I make up for it with my bubbly personality, Nariko smiled brightly. Now, her smile disappeared. Who's messing with the not murder happy Shin-chan? No one, Shinka replied carefully, he was disowned, I suppose. Nariko closed her eyes for a moment. Why? Our mother believes we killed our father by some twisted sense of logic, Shinka said. She's grieving, probably. I said some things I didn't really mean, and when they ended up happening she took it by heart. End result is that I've got to move this stuff to the new apartment before we head over for the mission to the capital. That's bullshit. How could she? Nariko brought a fist in the air, I'm slapping that bitch down to size. I don't know about murder happy Shin-chan, Shinka's right eyebrow twitched. Was she really using that as a nickname for her? But Shin-chan would never say anything bad. So here and now, I'm solving this problem once and for all. With that, she began to stomp her way out of Shinka's room. Shin-chan's mom. Come on out, you old hag. Shinka gave a pleading look to Suzuki, who nodded. Thankfully, the house appeared empty, and so Nariko was subdued without much of a fuss. A gagged and bound Nariko ended up deposited in front of the northern gate a few minutes later, while Suzuki crossed his arms in front of his chest and gazed at the girl with a look that could probably murder her. You calmed down enough, dope. Nariko groaned, before biting at the rope in her mouth. But. She spluttered out, Shin-chan's mom is a hag. Come on. She needs some therapy. Shin-chan wouldn't hurt a fly. Dope, Suzuki sighed, you know you can't just barge in people's lives like this, right? Why not? When someone needs help you should help, right? Nariko inclined her head to the side. You have the grace of a sledgehammer, Suzuki retorted. Look, you heard Kakashi yesterday. People need time and space to properly grieve, you can't just barge in immediately. It worked with you, Nariko crossed her arms over her chest. I had a week of alone moping and thought thinking, Suzuki retorted. Can't you cut Shinka some slack? Fine, Nariko raised her hands in the air. 1 week of moping Shin-chan, of sniffling Shin-chan, of whimpering Shin-chan, and then, when your heart will break because of the sadness that is a tear-filled Shin-chan, I will look at you and say this is what you wanted. Now enjoy a sad Shin-chan. And then I will headbutt you. Are you done? Suzuki raised his right eyebrow. Nariko pouted, moving her head sideways. Family shouldn't fight. Suzuki choked the rambling sound of his next words in his throat. I should have written a letter, Nariko mumbled. Something like make peace or I'll snap your legs. What are you, a yakuza? Suzuki retorted. And I think that would account to blackmail. Shinka returned just a couple of minutes from departure, when already the first carriages were waiting near the gate. He fidgeted for a moment, gazing low. Oh, Shin-chan, Nariko exclaimed, don't ya worry, I'm not angry, the girl smiled. Murder-happy Shinchan's gone back in his little hidey hole. Shinku nodded awkwardly. Sasuke sighed. Now let's hope Kakashi won't arrive late. By the way, Naruko smirked, what did you and Dad have to talk about? The girl wriggled her eyebrows, some Konoha and Taki stuff. No, Shinku scratched the back of his head. Kakashi vouched for me entering the Umbu training. Oh, Naruko blinked. There was a moment of silence as the girl looked around as if lost, as if Shinku hadn't said anything and she was still waiting for the words to come out. Then, calmly, she looked back at him. He did what? She asked softly. Apparently, there's an Umbu-specific training that you need to be vouched for in order to participate, Shinku replied, embarrassed. I didn't accept though. I'll have to give an answer after this mission. Very well, Naruko grumbled. She stomped off towards the head of the procession. What's the? Sasuke looked at Shinku for an instant, before replying. I think she'll murder Kakashi in his sleep. He looked sideways. I think I'll go and sharpen my blade. I might need it soon. You know I'm not a kid, right? Shinku muttered, I don't need to be babied. Sorry, it's a package deal. Comes with risking your life to save ours, Sasuke shrugged. We're returning the favor. Shinku shuddered. He knew they were going to treat him differently, but he didn't expect the babying. He could take care of himself. Kakashi arrived right on time, and soon the carriages departed. The silver-haired Jounin hummed a pleasant tune as he took the lead, flipping through the pages of the Ika-Ika half-boringly. A cold, dark chill ran across his spine. Kakashi nii, Naruko said, slowly appearing from his side. Can I ask you something? Yes. Do you like reading porn? Kakashi inclined his head to the side. Yes, very much. Good, that's good. You wouldn't, perhaps, want to see it burn, right? I hid it in a spot you will never find, Kakashi replied, his voice suddenly serious and his eyes attentive. You cannot blackmail me, Naruko-chan. No, you misunderstand Kakashi nii, Naruko smiled brightly. I thought about letting Sasuke buy a few Ika-Ika and then blaming it on you. I'm sure Mikoto-bachan will love to hear your excuses for corrupting poor little Yuki-chan. Name your price, Kakashi grumbled. Naruko smiled even more. I want in on the Umbu training if Shinchan chooses to go add Yuki-chan too, he'll probably swing around later. Why is that? Kakashi replied. Duh, Naruko rolled her eyes. Because where one of us goes, we all follow. That's what a team is, right? Kakashi closed his only eye and sighed. You rehearsed this? 5 minutes ago, Naruko nodded brightly. So? I'll have to think about it, Kakashi replied. I'll need your word you'll stop blackmailing me with burning my porn collection down however. Fine, Naruko shrugged. I can always blackmail you into chopping it, or putting it in water or something similar, or maybe covering it in paper eating insects or... Naruko rambled on through the many means of destroying porn, while Kakashi began to ignore her halfway through. Everything was going according to plan. 3 little Chiryunin went into Umbu training for 1 month, he got a month of free good old, do nothing and laze around. Then, once they returned, it would be a simple fact of letting them self-study the beauties of being Chiryunin and leading teams. He'd get some well-earned sleep. A few months of peace at a minimum, he was sure of it. Meanwhile, Minato proceeded to see to the departure of the other ambassadors and Kage from the foreign villages that had come to watch the tournament. You train your Umbu well, Zabuza grumbled from his spot at the side of the Mizukage. I couldn't go anywhere without one following me like the plague, the swordsman of the mist chuckled. To think I wanted to talk with the brat, the man sighed. I'm sure there will be another time. Minato's eyebrows twitched. Why all this interest in one of my shinobi, Mamakai? You need a reason to like someone. Zabuza chuckled. He's got nice eyes. Are you hearing yourself? You sound like a sick pedophile, Zabuza, May remarked dryly. What next? You'll write him a love letter. You want to start something, bitch. Zabuza growled back. Quiet, the both of you, Yagura said crisply. We'll take our leave before these two further embarrass the mist. With a light bow, the three were gone, escorted by a group of Konoha Umbu towards the border. Minato turned towards the Kazekige's group, and his lips twitched into a nervous smile. The Kazekige's two oldest children were extremely pale, as they were holding on to the youngest one's hands. The Kage of Suna said nothing, but he did inch a bit farther from the trio. The sooner I get back to Suna, the sooner I can forget what madness this tournament was all about, he replied crisply. Have a nice trip, Minato replied with a half-forced smile. They were gone in a twirl of sand and with an Umbu escort a moment later. Minato wiped away the sweat from his forehead, before giving a curt nod to another Umbu near him. The Umbu nodded back and flickered away. Now it was all a matter of Orochimaru taking the bait and swallowing it whole. Really, who wouldn't try to attack the daimyo's court returning to the capital? With Sasuke in clear sight and out of Konoha's walls, he had no doubts Orochimaru would strike, which was why he flashed away, to reappear inside one of the carriages hung as a portly man, just like the rest of the nobles who were nothing less than Umbu, the lot of them. He'd catch that snake once and for all, and when he did, he'd teach him a lesson. Nobody attacked Konoha with him as Hokage, nobody. Chapter 48, Unfortunate Circumstances Bleed Through. You're feeling alright, Shin-chan. Shinku's right eyebrow twitched. Want to take a rest, Shin-chan? His right hand clenched in a fist. Don't overexert yourself, Shin-chan. He bit his tongue. Doesn't your armor feel heavy? Are you drinking enough? You know it's not good to let your body go dry, but you can't drink too much or you'll end up going for a bathroom break too soon. Shinku gazed at Naruko a moment later. I am fine. Naruko blinked. You sure? Yes, he hissed out, really. You know, you don't have to hold it in. You can tell everything to your beautiful teammate Naru-chan. I would very much like it if you stopped trying to baby me, Shinku dryly muttered. Naruko blinked once more. Oh, all right. You want to sit on the carriage's roof. Shinku's hands ringed themselves upwards as his throat emitted a constricted garbled sound. It had already been 2 hours. 2 hours of Naruko fussing and asking if he needed anything ranging from food to water. He didn't need that sort of attention. It wasn't just embarrassing considering the nobles in the carriages that he swore were enjoying the scene, but it was also completely unneeded. When are you going to stop worrying? He finally exhaled. I'm not worrying, Naruko replied with a light hum. Want a wool cap? It's getting windy recently. Shinku spluttered, before opting for simply falling quiet. He gazed at his right hand once more, and then sighed. The bug was bright red. Everything was fine. The carriages pulled past the forest and onto the plain, which stretched for quite a bit throughout the land of fire. Rice fields gently gave way to small hills and cobblestone paths, as villagers who worked the land moved close to the road to watch the procession pass by. Sasuke scratched the side of his neck where the curse mark was, his eyes trailing around to the farmers and their families. A few women stuck their heads out of the nearby mud and wood huts to gaze at the carriages passing by, while they held back their children from running towards the horses. The day went by quietly. The sun slowly began to die as Kakashi gave the order to camp for the night. The noble's servants apparently had all they needed to set up an elaborate makeshift kitchen. Shin-chan can do the first shift, Naruko piped in. Yuki-chan can take the second and I can have the third. No, Kakashi hummed with his eye smile. You will go to sleep before I wring your neck myself, the silver-haired Jounin said. Understood. Naruko swallowed nervously, before preparing to hold her ground. It's enough, Shinku said calmly. Really, he looked towards Naruko. I appreciate the thought, but I'm not made of glass. I'm fine. Everything is fine. So, please, stop. Maybe it was the pleading tone, but Naruko backed off. Fine, she mumbled. But I'm keeping an eye out on you. And with that, she stormed off to sleep. She never knows when to stop, Sasuke exhaled. She can get annoying sometimes, but she's not, well, you know how she is by now, right? Yeah, Shinku muttered back. I suppose I do. You'll do the middle watch, Kakashi gestured towards Shinku. I'll do the first one, so go and get some sleep. Sasuke, you'll do the third. Shinku and Suzuki both nodded back, before heading over to their area of rest. The nobles had some tents pitched up, and apparently had begun partying and loudly drinking as if they enjoyed attracting the attention of the entire countryside. There was nothing but the lull of the wind against the rice stalks and the tree branches all around the small campfire nestled in a corner and covered by rocks. It was like camping, only with the risk of ambush at any moment by some wandering shinobi. Shinku's nose twitched, as he smelled the proverbial odor of ramen in the air. He wondered how his teammate could keep on eating the same thing without ever growing bored of it. Kakashi's doing first shift, Suzuki said as Nariko gave a nod in their direction. Shinku does the second and I go third. Kakashi nii sucks, Nariko mumbled, before wiping away a smudge of ramen from her lips. A ramen cup ended up in his hands and as Suzuki pretty much suffered the same fate, with a sigh, they all set to eat their dinner while just a few steps away he was sure the nobles were eating something way different than cup ramen, probably caviar or something like that. When was it any different? Suzuki grumbled. Grab some sleep, and with that, the Uchiha literally dropped to the side and pulled the sleeping bag over his head. Nariko pouted, before doing the same. Shinku imitated the other two, his gaze went up towards the twinkling sky for a moment more. The moon was so bright and as he did, his eyes slowly closed. Inner gazed into the massive shredded pools of limbs and scattered blood splatters that stretched throughout the desert of bloodied sand. He took a deep shuddering breath. This is your entire fault. They screamed. Just a failure in the end. They snarled. For the love of, shut up. Inner snarled as he pounced once more on the nightmares. He wouldn't sleep a wink that night too, he supposed. Waking came all too early. Your turn, Kakashi muttered, his right hand gripping Shinku's shoulder as his left stilled his wrist. Shinku's left hand had palmed the Kirigaku or Kunao in a flash, and had apparently been in the direction of Kakashi's sides by the time the Jounin had stopped the attack. Nice reflexes. Busy night in here, Shinku grumbled back, slowly standing up. The camp was quiet and not even a dim light remained outside. The tents filled with bright shadows, moving around and talking. Nobles probably didn't have anything else to do but to talk. He flexed his fingers as he took a spot atop a nearby tree, using the branches as cover. From his position, he could see the tents and the nearby surroundings. He rubbed his eyes for a moment, before stifling a yawn. He actually wondered how he was supposed to count the passing of time, maybe by the position of the stars or the shadows cast by the moon's light. His breathing evened out. Something wet fell down his cheek. It rolled down his chin and dropped on the bark of the branch. Shinku bit his lips, gripping on the sides of the branch with his fingers. His father was dead. He would never return to his home. A sniffle escaped his nose. He would never wake up in his bed again. He wouldn't read any post-it, he wouldn't be heading over to the bakery any longer. He would have to buy his own groceries. He'd have to clean the room. The apartment was thankfully a one-room thing and pay the bills by himself. He wondered, really, what did he have to do for life to let him be? He wiped away his tears, taking a deep breath as he steadied himself on the branch a bit more. He had a mission to do. He couldn't waste his time in thinking about other things. He couldn't get distracted. This mission was a B rank. It meant there could be at any moment a potential shinobi attack. He had to remain concentrated. The wind blew softly throughout the night, the only noise Shinku heard except for the nobles bantering and then subsequent snoring. There wasn't anything else. He watched the moon slowly move in the night sky, until he quietly decided he had waited long enough. The sun was going to rise in just a couple of hours. He stretched carefully, gripping on the side of the tree as he descended it. He returned to the camp as silently as possible, before kneeling next to the sleeping Uchiha. Suzuki, he whispered. The Uchiha actually opened his eyes in less than a split second, before groaning lightly. My watch already? Yes. Suzuki deftly stood and left for yet another spot to watch over. Shinku crawled back into his sleeping bag, and returned to sleep. When Shinku woke up again, it was to the sound of a deafening explosion. His kunao slammed home into something the moment he stood from his rucksack, his eyes wide and his breath labored. The sides of a sound shinobi turned red with blood. The man gurgled, eyeing him with wide eyes and a kunao in hand. Near him, he could hear a punch connect with a man's jaw and the cracking of bones. A giant snake slithered its way across the ground, tearing apart the nobles' tents and leaving behind a long trench in the ground. There weren't any screams of fear, any indication that there were scared civilians anywhere, but the roaring fire that stuck out like a sore thumb through the small patch of trees and the sparks given by Kunao meeting Kunao told another story. It wasn't a carnage. No, if anything it seemed a fought-out battle between two sides. He found himself grabbed by the shoulders, Nariko's face appearing wide-eyed right in front of his. "OHI! Shin-chan! We've got to move and find Yuki-chan." Another explosion came terribly close, as a bright flash of light blinded him. He found himself hoisted over Nariko's shoulder before he could even react. "I'm getting you out of here!" Nariko yelled, "We'll find Yuki-chan." The girl ran, until some sort of great pressure, probably a wind technique, tore through the ground nearby and sent her and Shinku flying. She popped with the typical sound of a cage bunshin, but he ended up rolling on the ground with his sight unfocused. There wasn't a clear picture. It was an ambush. The enemy was sound. How many enemies were there? Where were the nobles? Was he supposed to go back? It was a B rank, right? Enemy shinobi were expected. His duty was to be ready and die for the clients. He gripped the grass with his fingers, turning his head around. There still were black spots in his vision, and what little he saw seemed to dance around, but he did see a large yellow projectile soar the air and strike an umbu, apparently, straight in the guts. The masked shinobi twisted in midair, the blow piercing him from side to side and letting him fall on the ground bleeding to his death. There was an archer somewhere. There were umbu escorting them. He didn't hear many sounds, the explosion's lingering noise kept his eardrums ringing. He got back on his feet, holding a hand to his forehead to wipe away. There was blood trickling down from the side of his head. His heart drummed. His breathing grew ragged. "Move." He ran straight ahead, his head low and grounding his teeth. He jumped for the nearest tree, landing on its branch and pushing his left hand against the trunk to swing behind it. A moment later, and a volley of shuriken sailed right where he would have been. They were aiming at the stragglers first. He jumped down the tree, hiding behind its trunk on the ground just as the upper side was torn apart cleanly by a rock the size of a human. He gripped his kunao, looking around for any sort of clue on what he had to do now. Did he have orders? Did he have a directive? Was there something he had to do? He was the Chiryunin now, wasn't he? Didn't he get some sort of clue on what a Chiryunin did? What were they expecting from him? Did they think it was easy to just be a Chiryunin? Down. He fell on the ground just as the lower side of the trunk ended uprooted by a giant earth spike. The tree's roots dangled in front of him covered in dirt and lifting a light sheen of dust. He didn't think he could outrun his enemies. His body twisted with the strength of desperation as he changed the trajectory of his charge. He slammed his right foot against the earth spike to propel himself across the ground, holding his body low and the kunao at the ready. He couldn't see anything, but he wondered if taking a technique to the chest would be a better death than taking one in the back. The ground trembled and broke behind him. The enemy had expected him to keep on running, so he had actually earned a few seconds of respite. A sound ninja charged at him from the side, flanked by his two teammates. Shinku pushed his arms up, covering his face as he felt the kunao stab at him in the chest and in the flanks. The metallic plates absorbed the impact, but the brunt strength of it astounded him and forced him to let go of his kunao. Thrust. His right arm went right and his left arm went left. His fingers dug into the shinobi's faces as he screamed in fear and rage. He slammed them both against one another, crushing their skulls. Blood and gray matter splattered on his face as he pushed his entire body forward, his head slamming strongly against the third one. The air still lacked from his lungs, but he managed to grip onto the man's mottled scarf and pull him closer to him. His teeth dug into the creatures, snarling as he bit and ripped. Blood sprayed from the wound as Shinku pushed the bleeding shinobi away. The sound ninja stumbled for a moment, before falling on the ground. "Why do I even bother?" a male voice remarked. "Trash will be trash, always." A pale-haired teen wearing a long gray robe with a strange-looking sash tied around his waist appeared in the edge of Shinku's waning vision. Did he have some sort of lump on his back? You look interesting, the voice said. What's your name, Trash? Shinku shuddered, taking a deep breath. He could breathe now. For a short while, he could assess the situation and find a way out. What's yours? He replied. Trash thinks he has guts, the teen said. There was a blur of speed, and the next instant a barrage of blows connected with his stomach. Let's tenderize them. Shinku's body doubled over as his mouth opened, spewing out bile and blood. Now in that instant, he really would have loved some help. And the grand final, 2 left and 2 right arms slammed on both of Shinku's sides, propelling him backwards with his back slamming against the rock lance he had passed by before. The rock cracked as Shinku screamed in pain, coughing and raggedly breathing. The jacket couldn't help him against blunt attacks like those fists which felt heavy as lead. What sort of monster was he fighting? A dark yellow lance flied through the air next, directed towards him. His body instinctively twisted to the side, ignoring the atrocious agony that coursed through his entire being. Instead of piercing his heart, the lance-like arrow slammed into his left arm, shattering the bone and sticking him to the rock. He screamed in utter pain as he saw the blood spray out of his unresponsive limb. Well, the sound teen smirked. We can have some fun now, can't we? The first fist slammed into the side of Shinku's head, soon followed by another into his abused sides. Another came, and then one more, before they simply became part of a barrage. The forest was ablaze as Orochimaru gazed with a look of sourness at the yondaime. You had the galls, the snake Sunin remarked, to have a gerbil steal the forbidden scroll back. Minato smiled. You should really have checked for unwanted passengers. You didn't think I would actually use the high ration and end up summoned somewhere to your liking. And this, Orochimaru looked around. The snake Sunin snorted. You prepared quite nice bait, Minato. Well, now that there isn't a village to risk, the yondaime remarked, I can fight you until you kick the bucket. Such a cold heart, Orochimaru said, risking the lives of your precious daughter and her friends. They're shinobi, and they've proven their skills, Minato retorted. I trust them to stay alive until the mop up your crew of scum. Orochimaru chuckled. Let's not waste time then, I have an Uchiha to make mine. Naruko lowered her head and avoided a giant fist barreling just an inch away from her face. The orange-haired guy who was practically bald anyway if not for a few tufts of hair seemed to enjoy trying to get her in close combat. Who was she to say no to a strength battle? Her hands clasped tightly around the outstretched and open-palmed ones of her enemy. Naruko grinned with a feral and half-demonic smile, standing her ground. "Ohi fat lard ball. Is this all you've got? You sucking piece of garbage. Don't you call me fat." Jirobo yelled back, his eyes widening as he pushed all his strength against the girl who was just half his size. Yet she didn't move an inch. "Ohi, want to know something funny, fatty?" Naruko giggled, even as her hands tightened the grip. "I've got near-endless stamina. I don't get tired like other people, and when I do I get right back up in a few minutes, and you know what that means." Her eyes sharpened as she growled. "It means that I can fucking lift your lard ass all the way to the frigging moon." Jirobo felt the ground leave as he was lifted by a girl half his size. He roared in anger, his cursed mark flaring up as chakra pumped through his veins and muscles. He'd show the girl. He wasn't going to let this affront stand. His wrists suddenly cracked. The girl smiled brightly at the sight of blood gushing out from the man's broken bones. "I said it before, lard ass," Naruko snarled. "If this is all you've got, then I'm sending you to the frigging moon." There was a roar and a light flash of crimson chakra, before Naruko twisted her body with a ferocious and sharp jerking motion. There was a cracking sound, and soon Jirobo was handless and rolling on the ground screaming. Naruko crunched with her hands the torn limbs of the enemy teen, before throwing the 2 small balls of flesh and bones on the ground at her sides, discarding them like garbage. Her right fist slammed into her left open-palmed hand. "My name's Naruko Namikaze, bastard," she hissed. "Remember it in hell." The last thing Jirobo saw was the underside of a foot slamming home against his face, before the crunching sound of his skull caving in and his brain splattering ended his thoughts and life at the same time. Naruko spat to the side of the corpse, before turning around. She had to find Yuki-chan and Shin-chan, wherever they were. She should have taken Shinchan personally, instead of letting a Cage Bunshin carry him. If only Duck Butt used the Susanoo, then she'd know where the hell he was. Her eyes scanned the battlefield, taking in the Umbu, the raging fire, the shinobi attacking one another. They settled finally on a form. She took off with two crimson tails bursting from her back the next second. Seikon grinned as he lifted his right hand, savoring the moment the punch would connect with the trash's already fractured chin. It was a moment, and then Yukon barely managed to warn him in time. A chakra claw swiped the air where his head would have been. His feet moved him backwards enough to avoid another swipe which ended with a cracking ground. Dust lifted from the ground as a feral roar deafened him, before twin tails of crimson chakra shot forth. Seikon twisted his body, letting the tails pass harmlessly over him. The heat made the grass burn as the sound ninja ground his teeth in frustration. Nariko charged, her fist an inch away from the sound teen when an arrow slammed against her chest. The chakra cloak absorbed the brunt of the impact, but it slowed her enough to give Seikon the time to spin his body forward and punch the girl in the cheek with all four of his fists. He screamed in pain a moment later, the heat of the chakra unbearable. Nariko's left hand gripped tightly onto one of the four hands. She growled with her eyes crimson and her fangs bare, her whisker marks pronounced. "Hello one to Kidomaru," Seikon grumbled. "Yukon. It's your turn." Yukon snaked out of his brother's body, slamming against the chakra cloak end, and screaming in pain as he returned into his brother's body. "I can't. That bitch's chakra is." "Oh." Nariko smiled, "You fuckers weren't told the Kyuubi's chakra corrosive." Nariko's twin tail swished in the air as her grip remained strong. "Why, let me show you how it fucking works." The crimson cloak roared as it poured through Nariko's hands and throughout Seikon and Yukon's shared body. The twins screamed as their flesh burned and turned to black ashes. Their very blood boiled and broke apart as the Kyuubi's chakra coursed through them. "Let go! Let go! Let go! Let go!" Seikon's screams died out as nothing more than a charred husk of him and his brother remained behind. Nariko snorted. Her tail slowly disappeared as she quickly dashed towards Shinku's battered body. Her teammate didn't look good at all. His arm twisted in an unnatural angle, there was just so much blood pooling down from his mouth and pierced limb. All right, what do I do?" Nariko's hands went to her head. Calm down, calm down. Shinchan. You're, Shinchan." There was no reply. "Shinchan." Nariko's voice was meek. "Shinchan." She croaked out once more, her hands gripping on the arrow pinning her teammate's body to the rock. "It's going to be alright, yeah, Tabia, hang on." She clenched her fists. "Sasuke. Where the fucking hell are you?" Sasuke's body twisted, trying to free his hands from the chains. His chakra sealed by a tag applied to his chest, his hands and legs bound, he growled eyeing the lithe and pale-haired boy who was standing guard over him. "Capturing you has not proven to be a challenge," Kimimaro spoke. "All is going according to Orochimaru-sama's plans." Sasuke hissed with his wrists raw from the effort of freeing one hand. All he needed was to free one hand, remove the tag, and then crush the bastard to death. They weren't far from the battle, which was slowly but surely winding down. A tanned man appeared a moment later. Seikon and Yukon were done in just like Jirobo. He eyed Sasuke. "I don't think we'll manage to get the Kyuubi's Jinhiriki. The Yondame's putting up a hell of a fight against Orochimaru-sama." "Orochimaru-sama will win," Kimimaro replied. "Yeah, like hell," Sasuke hissed. "He's going to lose, and when the Yondames come around, he'll take care of the lot of you in a flash." "Shut the fuck up, trash." Kidomaru yelled back, "Just count yourself lucky Orochimaru-sama chose your body." A kick slammed Sasuke's body on the ground. The Uchiha coughed out in pain. "Kidomaru," Kimimaro said calmly, "stop or I will kill you. Do not harm Orochimaru-sama's future body." Sasuke pushed his body forward, letting it ground against the dirt. The chakra tag ripped. His eyes turned to the Mangekyou form before the other two could react. Susanoo. Standing in the middle of the chakra construct, awash with chakra, Sasuke's eyes spun as the creature's weapon came crashing down. Kidomaru and Kimimaro both dodged, gazing at the creature. You fucking piece of trash. Kidomaru yelled. You're the trash, Kidomaru, Kimimaro snarled even as bones began to grow all around his body. For Orochimaru-sama, I will capture you again. Kidomaru morphed, his seal activating and reaching the second stage. Sasuke. Naruko appeared in a flicker of leaves, come quick. Shinchan's wounded end. A bone bullet slammed into the girl's chest. Naruko disappeared in a puff of smoke. Sasuke turned his eyes towards his opponents. I'm in a hurry, he snarled, stand aside now. The Uchiha charged ahead, the Susanoo following him like protective armor. Kimimiro's fully transformed form pounced at him with his giant bone drill ahead, trying to halt his advance. The Susanoo's armor absorbed the blow, before one of its hands came down to swat the teen away. Kimimaro sailed through the air, blood escaping from his mouth as he landed abruptly on the ground. Kidomaru snarled in frustration, as 5 arrows left his bow and neither managed to pierce the absolute defense of the Uchiha. Where the fucking hell is Teiwa when you need her? Teiwa clicked her tongue in distaste. It wasn't a matter of being more than the enemy. The Umbu were better. The trash Orochimaru-sama had given her to kill the nobles had practically been annihilated, and she was holding on to her life no matter what orders she had. She wasn't going to die because some trash couldn't frigging win. Her ONI swatted away at an Umbu, whose colleagues flanked her in that instant. A Tonto came down for her right arm, but she brought her flute to parry the attack. Another Umbu they appeared like fucking maggots came from the other side, and before she could even scream, it was over. Her left arm fell on the ground with a sickening squelch. Blood sprayed over the Umbu's mask as a fist connected with Teiwa's sides. The girl doubled over, and thus darkness claimed her. Shinku trembled from the cold. Inner gazed ahead with his arms crossed. Damn, the desert's nights are cold, he stated plainly. We dead yet? Shinku asked, looking around as the plateau of sand and blood slowly crumbled piece by piece. No, not yet, Inner remarked. Well, at least we aren't getting any more nightmares. He eyed the pulsing mass of flesh and screams that had all but reduced itself to a small tendril, floating near the edge of the crumbling platform. No, stand up and fight, speech. You realize we're probably dead no matter what, Inner remarked. And I have my limits too, he exhaled, his eyes gazing at Outer tiredly. Well, seems like this is our limit. Well, at least we killed 3 guys before going down. That's nice, I suppose. Outer shuddered, his teeth chattering. It's cold. Death sure as hell isn't warm. Inner walked closer to Outer, before plopping down right behind him, back to back. Well, Inner gazed upwards. It was nice knowing you, Shinku. The plateau of sand crumbled faster, the ground cracking and splitting apart. Why did my subconscious have to be a blood-soaked desert? Outer mumbled. It could have been a granite wall. You don't take down a granite wall now, do you? Everything falls, Inner said. Everything ends. Everyone, eventually, dies. I would have liked to see Fu one last time, Shinku mumbled. Oh, for the love of, dying in someone's arm is overrated, Inner snapped back, dying in general is overrated. Well, at least I'm going to hell with company, Outer remarked with his lips twitching upwards. Thanks for being here. The back of his head bumped against Inner's own, who returned the favor. Anytime, Inner said. Well, see you on the other side. The crumbling sand neared, only but a palm away. Is it normal to be scared? Shinku whispered. Because I'm scared. Yeah, falling in the darkness does that, Inner mumbled back. Take a deep breath and close your eyes. The sand finished crumbling. A mere inch away from the tip of his cross-legged feet, the sand stopped falling. Inner froze too, before suddenly starting to laugh madly. Ah, I can't believe it. He laughed out to his heart's content. We're alive? How? Ahaha, we've used all our luck now. Yeah, it must be it, no other explanation. His head pounded as if someone were grinding it. His body felt cold, breathing came out hurting his throat, his chest, his entire frame. Yet his eyes opened barely of a crack. A soft green glow was at his arm. He supposed it was going to scar. You fuckers, way, Hin-chan. That was Naruko's voice, or what little he understood. Uchiha. Another voice, definitively male. The soft glow moved across his arm and towards his chest. I never did this before, Sasuke mumbled, his voice tense as sweat pooled down from his forehead. I read it, I memorized it, but... He ground his teeth. Just stick with me. All right, Shinku? You just have to stick with me. Grit your teeth, Sasuke mumbled, first it's internal bleeding. Have to stop it. Have to. The feeling of hot scorching metal through his skin made Shinku scream in pain as he tried to move away from it, but the firm grip of, it had to be one of Naruko's Kage Bunshin, held him still. OHI. You're hurting him. We don't have time. Sasuke snarled back. He's lost too much blood already. Come on Shin-chan, stick with us. Naruko yelled to the side of his ear. He felt his entire body twist and roll around even though he wasn't moving and wished he was dead, rather than suffering from whatever this was. I think I patched up an eardrum, Sasuke mumbled, his hands to the sides of Shinku's head. The brain is, concussions are, don't fall asleep. Ugh. No retching, try to hold it in, Sasuke grumbled. The fuckers left, another Naruko appeared at the edge of his vision. How's Shin-chan? He'll pull through, Sasuke said firmly, he has to, or how the hell are we going to be even on the life-saving thing? And whose pure love am I going to peep on if he dies here? Shinku tried to chuckle, but ended up coughing out blood. Calm down, small breaths. Sasuke said. Dope. Can't you find a medic? Umbu should have some basics down, right? Naruko disappeared out of his vision. Shinku's eyelids felt heavy, as he exhaled. Don't. Stay the hell awake. Sasuke exclaimed, his right hand pinching hard on Shinku's abused cheek. Don't you dare fall asleep. Not without a medic checking on you. Don't you even think for a minute to fall asleep, do you hear me Shinku? Stay awake. He could just catch a quick nap. No. It's an order. I swear I'm putting you through a genjutsu if you don't stay the hell awake. Does he ever shut up? He must, like the sound of his voice. Orochimaru panted, his kusanagi tightly held in his right hand. His body covered in wounds, the snakes that composed his real body carefully knitted them close. It appears you've lost, Orochimaru, Minato remarked, holding one of his three-pronged kunai at the ready. Eventually, Sasuke will be mine, Orochimaru replied with a half-bored tone. I'll leave for the moment, Minato, he smiled. You'd best take care of your wounded, you never know when you might need more men. Just tell me, Orochimaru, Minato growled. What makes you think I'll let you go? There was the sound of the rakery building up. What would you give, Orochimaru said suddenly, in exchange for your loved ones? What would you sacrifice for them? Minato narrowed his eyes. What are you finished it? The yondaime murmured. You completed that technique. Oh, yes, Orochimaru smiled, I did. Kakashi charged. His hand covered in the electric blue of his trademark technique as he slammed it straight through the chest. Orochimaru wasn't hit. A figure shot out from the shadows and took the blow straight to the chest. Kakashi stilled, his breathing dying as his eyes took in the appearance of the shinobi no, the kunoichi who had taken the brunt of the blow. This brings back memories, the voice was soft, just like he remembered. Not at all pleasant ones too, she softly added. Rin backhanded Kakashi away, just as her ripped chest slowly reformed in front of his widened and shocked eyes. What is Kakashi-kun? Seen a ghost? Rin sneered in his direction. Rin. Minato croaked. Minato-sensei, Rin smiled, looking at the yondaime. How nice. If only Obito were here, it would be the old team once more. Orochimaru. Kakashi roared, charging ahead. No. Kakashi. Don't! Minato's scream fell on deaf ears as his pupil didn't listen, rage and fury blinding his senses to anything else. The kusanagi sailed the air nimbly, slicing through Rin's body and Kakashi's. The Jounin barely managed to halt his advance, earning a gash on the stomach rather than a full-out halving of his body. Very well Hokage-sama, Orochimaru smirked as he watched Rin's halved body reform under his eyes. We will take our leave, the Kusanaga's poison will kill him in 3 days of excruciating torment, so you better make him comfortable before his end. The snake Sunin gave a sneer, and with a chuckle, disappeared together with Rin. Rado! He barked, gather the others and prepare the high ration. We have no time to waste. First we send the critically wounded back. Yes, sir. Rado exclaimed from behind his Umbu mask, before beginning to round up the survivors. It had been a slaughter, on the enemy's side. Orochimaru had apparently attacked with a small force of sound shinobi, but none of them were beyond Chiryunin level, except for a key few that had made some casualties on their sides. He watched dispassionately as a tiger-masked Umbu clenched the hem of the outfit of another dead one, probably his colleague, and screamed at him to wake up. A few of the bodies were cradled by sniffling teammates, a couple laid to rest in quiet silence with their teammates looking on and probably behind the masks letting silent tears fall. The pile of the sound shinobi was taller, however. At least 2 dozens of corpses, all being prepared for transport back in Konoha, were one atop the other. He'll be fine, he heard a female voice say. He turned just in time to see the Yondame's daughter exhale in relief, her face visibly dist-ending. Next to her, the chief of the police's son wiped away the sweat from his forehead. Their teammate was with his back against a rock spike, covered in drying blood. He had probably ended up receiving the brunt of an attack. Compared to his teammates, who were both unscathed and unblemished, he really did stand out as the dead last of his class. Rado neared. Will he make it if we move him? The Umbu, probably a medic judging by the soft glow of her hand, gave him a quick look. If Konoha's hospital wasn't a pile of rubble, I'd say yes. As it stands, it's all a matter of seeing if he survives the night. The woman gazed towards the grimacing Sasuke. You did well, boy, she said. He would have bled out without your intervention. Sasuke clenched his fists, before giving a nod to the woman. The woman stood up then. I'd say to move him when you're sure the guys on the other side can take care of him. Now I'm sorry, but I have to check on the other wounded. Rado nodded, letting the Umbu wearing a crane mask leave. You'll have to write a report about what happened, he said towards the 2 Chiryunin. For what it's worth, you'll receive pay as if it were an S rank. Hooray, Sasuke muttered, rolling his eyes. As if a millionth ryo is worth seeing my teammate in this state, he knelt down next to Shinku. Anything else, Umbu-san? Your sensei, Rado began hesitantly. Orochimaru wounded him. Unless he's dead, Kakashi and I will pull through, Naruko retorted. So, when are we moving Shin-chan? When they're done sending the first ahead, Sasuke replied. Someone will come and warn you, Rado finished, leaving the 2 Chiryunin behind. Naruko remained quiet for a moment, her eyes moving from her bloodied hand to Shinku's bloody body. You think he'd ever get this wounded if he were in another team? Sasuke snorted. Probably he'd be picking weeds out of a garden for years still. I wouldn't blame him, Naruko mumbled. I'd actually like to weed a garden for once. We did weed one already, Sasuke said. Nah, I left it to Shin-chan. He really was enjoying himself. Sasuke's lips twitched upwards. Hey, Naruko said, I think Shin-chan needs some training, she added. Like, a lot. You plan on forcing your way in Umbu, Dobe? I can so totally act like an Umbu, team, Naruko pouted back. What's there of difficult? Just keep your mouth shut and act like you've got to stick up your ass to 11. The 2 of them fell quiet. You'll probably need a hand in there, Sasuke remarked, breaking the silence. I could. No, Naruko shook her head. You go and become a medic nin, because even though I'm awesome, Shin-chan's going to get so many wounds he'll need you to keep him from kicking the bucket. Have some faith in his skills, Sasuke rolled his eyes. He's not that bad. No, but he isn't like us either, Naruko mumbled back. No other words were spoken. Shinku fell asleep then. He was too tired to hear anything anymore, and judging by how his teammates were speaking, they probably assumed he had been knocked unconscious by the Umbu's treatment. There was no need to hear more. He knew he wasn't like them. There was no need to twist the kunao in the wound. Chapter 49, Kindness of Friends. It hurt to breathe. It hurt to open his eyes. The light hurt. Everything hurt. If there was one thing, one thought Shinka felt would aptly describe his situation, it would be a mix between never-ending atrocious agony and maddening moment of pure pain. The taste of iron in his mouth, the feeling of dried blood over his skin, it probably was because he hadn't been washed. The bed he was on didn't feel any different from a hospital one, but the air was different. His half-open eyes opened fully a moment later, as he took in the change of scenery. He was in a room. He was in a bright orange room. He was in a bright orange room where the light of the sun gleamed off the walls and made it painfully blinding to even stare at anything that wasn't the bed's sheets. The bed sheets were an atrocious green and orange, which didn't make it any better. The green actually appeared to be some sort of toad motif. There were a few pictures hanging from the wall, coupled with shelves that seemed overwhelmed with scrolls. The smell of ramen was so overpowering it probably was a reason he felt the need to retch. His left arm was in a firm cast, which he couldn't apparently move. The mystery of the ramen stench lasted until his eyes traveled beyond the bed sheets, and towards what had seemed like a gleaming white pile of plastic. It was a white tower made of empty ramen cups. It not only stood a good human size tall, but it also had the uncanny ability of defying gravity. The room was empty of any other human life, however. He exhaled. If he had to make an educated guess, this looked precisely like a room he imagined Nariko to have. However, he also doubted they'd let him sleep in her room in the Hokage's mansion, since he was pretty sure they had spare rooms for ambassadors and their families. Hence, this was probably a guest room turned into playroom working spot for Nariko. He'd bet his insanity on it. "We'd probably return sane," he mumbled, "too easy to guess this. Guess the hospital's still in dire straits." He gazed to his right hand. The beetle was still there, bright red and alive. There was a simple moment of quiet. He wheezed as he felt his throat constrict. He was alive. Even the smell of ramen didn't feel so bad now that he thought about it. He was alive. He was still breathing. He could. No. He winced and nearly screamed from the pain. He wasn't going anywhere any moment soon. "I feel sick," he gazed at the ceiling. "If anyone can hear me, I'd like a wash basin." There was no reply. Slowly, his eyes closed once more. Eventually, someone was bound to come in and check on his condition. He abruptly woke up thanks to a sharp, strong, and prolonged scream. "You brat! Baa-chan! Catch me if you can!" The door opened with a bang, before Nariko dashed inside. A big-breasted ponytailed woman entered next, seemingly with the intention of slamming home a few fists against the girl. She stopped however at the sight of Shinka, which was probably what Nariko had intended all along. "No fighting with a patient nearby." Nariko piped out, "Your rules, Baa-chan." The woman's amber eyes gave a pissed look at his teammate. "You're lucky, brat, to be my goddaughter." Nariko chuckled lecherously. "You have to tell me your secret, Baa-chan. They're just too big to be natural." "What the hell do you know about it, You don't know how many years I spent as a board." Tsunade replied, clenching her right fist and waving it in front of Nariko. "This," she gestured at her breasts, "is the result of all those years of suffering." "Ah." Shinka croaked out. Hello. Shin-chan." Nariko nearly tackled him. It was a nearly because Tsunade gripped the girl by the scruff of the neck and held her down. "Remember your strength, brat," Tsunade exclaimed. "Now, let's see what we've got here," she snorted as she neared Shinka's form. "They didn't even wash you," she mumbled. "They must have been pressed at the time." "Yeah," Nariko grumbled. "They fixed him up and left him there. If I hadn't come along and brought him here, he'd probably be sleeping in a corner of a tent or something, really. How do they expect people to heal without ramen and orange's positive influence?" Tsunade's lips twitched upwards even as a light green chakra began to run through her hands, which she gently laid across Shinka's chest. "Well, and here I thought the Uchiha were good only to fan their farts up their noses," the slug Sunin grumbled. "Your teammate did a patchwork job, but it did hold enough for the medic to do theirs, and whoever treated you is an arsehole," she added. Really, not even deadening the nerves, her hands moved towards his broken arm, and they didn't heal the micro-fractures, Course they probably didn't have the time, but... So, you can fix Shin-chan, Baa-chan. Yes brat, I can fix him, Tsunade sighed. He's not the worst I've seen, and if he's awake now, it means he's got quite the resilience. Used to it, Shinku mumbled. I don't doubt it, Tsunade rolled her eyes. Well, let's get you all patched up. It was a matter of minutes. Whoever said chakra wasn't wonderful needed to have his brain fixed. Within mere minutes, Shinku was if not quite painlessly standing back on his 2 feet. Now, don't you dare make any effort on your left arm for at least 2 days, Tsunade remarked. I'm serious here. I'm good, but your body needs time to rest. All right. Then I'll show him around the house. Naruko exclaimed, and where the bath is, she added. I wanted to wash Yushin-chan, but Yu-chan stopped me, she sniffled. If you need a hand with your back, she gazed at him lecherously, you just need to is. Tsunade's fist slammed into Naruko's head. The girl puffed out in a cloud of smoke. The sun inside just as the door barreled open again and another Naruko ran in. What was that for, Baa-chan? You need someone to kick out Jiraiya's influence from your body, brat. Why? Because going gambling and getting dead drunk is better. Naruko shot back. Don't talk back to your elders, girl. So you admit being an old hag. Shinku watched as the two snapped one against the other. He sat back down on the side of the bed, waiting for the verbal sparring to end. They were both panting hard by the time they realized they'd be going at it for a good half an hour. I'm done wasting time here, brat, Tsunade grumbled. I've got patients to take care of. See ya at dinner, hag. With a snort and a small smile, Tsunade of the Sun-in left the room. Naruko smiled brightly at Shinku, and Shinku felt dread run down his spine. So, Naruko, Shin-chan. How about a bath? A shower? He hazarded. Oh, Naruko blinked. Fine, she pouted. Follow me. He shakily stood up, before starting to walk next to Naruko. The floor was made of luxurious wood and the walls themselves appeared of marble. The furniture looked rich, and everything seemed to ooze off some sort of neat and expensive air. This place has got something like 5 or 6 servants cleaning every minute, Naruko grumbled. You can't make a smudge that it's already gone when you look at it again. Why am I? They didn't have space at the hospital tent, Naruko snorted, and there was no way I'd let you stay alone in that shoddy apartment. Really, Shin-chan? The girl looked at him softly. I've got so many guest rooms just lying around. And I mean, I even furnished them myself. Is that why? They're orange. Orange is an awesome color to be a, Naruko replied with a pout. And it catches attention. So if the enemy sees something orange, they look there and they don't realize you're moving up to them from the back, she snickered. Beneath the jumpsuit I've got a green shirt, who do you think would realize it in time? She crossed her arms behind her head, smugly looking upwards with her eyes half closed as she walked forward. Not that I need that, since I'm awesomely strong and fast anyway, she nodded to herself. You can start venerating the ground I walk on any moment now, Shin-chan. Shinku exhaled quietly. Where's Sasuke? He's pouting at the hospital, Naruko giggled. We did Jenkin to decide who was going to take care of you, and of course I won. So, like the sorry butt he is, he's sulking while helping out. She quickly flailed her hands in front of her, not that I'm not helping too. I've got Kage Bunshin going around the village and helping people. Shinku frowned, where's the real you then? Training, Naruko shrugged, like always. She made a show of flexing her right arm's muscles. These babies don't form in a fortnight. I see. Naruko hummed to herself as she showed him the bath, a luxurious marble bath with golden checkered faucets. You sure you don't want me to wash your back? Sure, Shinku replied. Naruko pouted, but didn't put up a fight as she closed the door behind her. He ended up hissing as he carefully washed his body under the hot water. On the positive side, the bruises wouldn't scar. On the negative, he now had a scar the size of a palm on his left arm. He supposed it could make for an interesting tale. Ah! He exhaled in relief, letting the water wash over him. His hair was slick with blood, and by the time he washed it clean there was a puddle of crimson water running down the drain. He hadn't gazed at the bed he had slept in, but he had probably left a mess there too. He wondered if it would be clean by the time he went back. When he stepped out of the shower, there were loose blue gym clothes waiting for him to don. He blinked, before blearily staring at the reflection of the mirror. She had to step inside to drop them, he mumbled. 9 to 10, she took pictures, his reflection replied. That's like betting on the sun rising in the morning. With a sigh, Shinku dressed up and stepped outside. Nariko was chuckling, but she gave him a thumb up. Nice. Now that you're dressed up, let's go to where my real me is. You took pictures, didn't you? Shinku said calmly, eyeing Nariko. Maybe, Nariko whistled. There's something extremely wrong with that, I hope you understand it, Shinku said. I'm doing this for Fu-chan. She'll need something to pull her through the dreadful weight of not seeing her Shin-chan. Shinku sighed. I'll never have a serious conversation with you, right? Nah, that's not true, Nariko hummed. We can totally make a serious conversation, she smiled brightly. So, you're planning on entering Ambu? I don't know, he acquiesced. Kakashi didn't even tell me about it, but... Kakashi NII is really sick right now, Nariko mumbled. Dad said he might not make it, the girl smiled a bit more, but knowing him, he'll be back from death's door in a moment. Shinku wearily looked sideways. Did he really want to enter Ambu? Well, no, it was more of, did he really want to go through Ambu training? He clenched his right fist. If he didn't, then would he ever become something else? He'd always be the one getting hit or wounded, while the others would simply pass him by. It was probably his pride speaking, but he wanted to become better. Probably I will, he mumbled in the end. I mean, if that's what Kakashi wanted then he probably knew best. I see, Nariko nodded. Shin-chan, you're clearly a masochist, right? Shinku spluttered. What? No. The sound of metal being hit reached his ears, and a few steps further brought him and Nariko's cage bunshin into a wide room filled with training equipment. Nariko the real one was sweating in a corner of the room, while lifting some heavy weights with both hands. The metallic sound came from her dropping the weights on the ground after every 5 movements of thrusting them upwards. Her clone popped up, and she turned around with a bright smile a moment later. Hey Shin-chan. Anyone ever told you you've got a nice ass? Shinku spluttered. What are you, an old pervert? I'm an awesome pervert. Nariko laughed out heartily. Shinku neared, carefully avoiding to crash into any of the machines hanging around. And this is my gym, where I train to become the sexiest kunoichi in the world to be a. Nariko lifted the weights again. Bah-chan fixed you up pretty nice, right? He sat down on a nearby bench. Yeah, he said, how long was I out? Not even 1 day, Nariko shrugged as she dropped the weights again. You just skipped on breakfast and lunch. Shinku settled quietly on watching Nariko train. You know, Nariko said suddenly, you can't use your left arm, but that doesn't mean you can't train the rest of your body. There's that machine over there, she gestured towards a corner, good for running. Or, we could spar and I promise not to hit you on your left side. Shinku gave her a raised eyebrow gaze. Well, I mean, you aren't getting bored right? No, Shinku replied. Oh, all right then, Nariko was squirming as she returned to her training. Shinku frowned slightly. He didn't understand what the fuss was about mostly, he didn't understand why the girl seemed uncomfortable. You know, Nariko said, if you're getting bored you can totally tell me, I won't get mad. I'm catching a breath after nearly dying, Shinku replied, I'm fine. Yeah, well, all right. A few minutes of silence, and Nariko squirmed once more. You're really sure you aren't? What's the problem? No, I mean, I wouldn't be able to stand still when someone else is training in front of me so, if you want to try anything just go ahead, alright. Fine. Minutes passed by in silence once more, until Nariko broke the quiet with a groan. Promise not to laugh. Shinku inclined his head to the side. Yes. It's embarrassing, being watched while training. Oh, Shinku looked downwards. I can leave if. No. I didn't mean it like that, Shin-chan. Nariko shook her head. It's just, you're not bored, are you? No, he deadpanned back. Good then, that's good. Why should I be bored? It's just that, well, I would be. I'm not you, Shinka replied. Right, yeah, that's right, Nariko hummed before letting go of the weights and starting to use the bench to do push ups. You know, with the Kyuubi I need just a minute of rest and then I can go at it again. I can practically train the entire day. Oh, Shinka raised an eyebrow. Don't you ever get bored? Nariko chuckled. I've got the cage bunshin for it. I'm practically used to letting them have fun while I stick here doing training. Man, I can't even remember the last time I ate a cookie. That cage bunshin was a lucky bitch, that's what she was. You eat ramen, Shinku deadpanned. Isn't ramen worse than cookies? It's not for that. I can't go in a sugar rush, Shin-chan, Nariko giggled. Last time I ended up running around like a squirrel. It's sugar and coffee, my mortal enemies. Why all this training? He asked. Because I can, Nariko mumbled. I mean, even that creepy green spandex guy, he could probably train for 3 days straight, but then he'd have to go to the hospital to treat his muscles, and the effort might kill him or wound his heart or something like that. I don't have those problems. I can train non-stop, 7 days a week, with only drinking and eating as a break. I get tired, and then the tired goes away. That's the Kyuubis for you, I suppose. I started training at 5, and here I am. You mean, with the cage bunshin? At 5, I could make 10 of those, Nariko mumbled. At 7, it was 300. I stopped counting, but by now I can easily make 6,000s, and a normal jounin can make something like a dozen before dying. Shinku stared at her wide-eyed. That's a lot. Yeah, I don't like to brag, Nariko chuckled, but I'm pretty strong. I just lack skills. Those dem fuckers in the forest, I don't know what type of hold they used or where the hell they hit me, but I suppose it's all training. I don't go down like others with the Kyuubi chakra in me. I mean, I think you could pretty much stab my heart and I'd still plow through you. Doesn't it hurt? It's a moment, Nariko shrugged as she twisted her body in midair, before doing the bridge and keeping up on stretching. And frankly, with the way the Kyuubi's chakra hurts when I use it, getting stabbed is really nothing. Shinku didn't say another word. Well, Nariko grumbled after a while, I'm taking 5, and with that, she plopped down on the bench next to him and dropped her head against his right shoulder. Wake me up by then, Shin-chan. Nariko began to snore. All right. He weakly mumbled. He could feel Nariko's sweat stick through the clothes he wore, but his eyes remained down towards the pavement. The girl had trained every day, for as long as possible, since she was 5. When he was 5, he barely remembered playing in his room with cubes or coloring pictures. Did he even have the right of getting stronger? He wasn't from a shinobi family. Reaching Chiryunin was already a good achievement. He could remain a Chiryunin, enter the workforce, and live happily without setting foot out of Konoha again. He didn't have to enter Umbu or aim for Jounin. He didn't have to try and become as strong as his teammates, which was already impossible, at least considering Nariko's strength. Men. Nariko mumbled in her sleep. Stop running. She giggled. The girl who could easily create 6,000 clones and crack apart the ground with a kick dreamed of pursuing ramen. Really, when he heard things like those. Things weren't as simple as they looked in the end. Minato Namikaze looked with his fingers crossed under his chin at the papers in front of him. Kakashi had pulled at every string he had before leaving for the mission. The Umbu leader was requesting new recruits to insert in the active ranks. Out of the list of shinobi proposed to begin Umbu training, Shinku Harano's name stuck out like a glaring eyesore. The fact Orochimaru had assumed control of the Sound Village, furthermore it couldn't be a coincidence that he only used Sound Shinobi, gave him no choice but to declare the state of war against the land of rice fields. If he did that, he couldn't let Nariko leave the village. Suzuki had asked to enter the medic corps for training, and that by itself would require a few months of learning under a mentor without any distraction. Kakashi was out, the Kusanaga's poison was still making him suffer even though Tsunade did her best. Rin's reappearance because of the Edo Tensei, he shuddered and closed his eyes. Orochimaru had to be stopped. I'm going to hell for this, he muttered as he gripped the thin brush to sign the papers. I know I'm going to hell. In tiny letters, he scribbled down 2 words at the bottom of the list of candidates for Umbu. All approved. He waited for the ink to dry, standing up and heading towards the window to gaze at the village behind the glass. The village comes first. He looked up at the sky. Fight on, Haranokan. He'd have to do the same. When Naruko and subsequently Kushina would know what he had done, he'd probably get the couch. Yes, he'd probably start checking it for traps that very night. Minato Namikaze returned home after work, calmly heading towards the place he knew he would find his daughter before dinner. He had expected Kushina to greet him at the door, but when she hadn't, he had simply exhaled and headed further inside the mansion and towards the gym. At least Naruko took her training seriously. He found Kushina, peeking through a crack of the gym's door with a camera in her hands and a glint of mischief in her eyes. Next to her, Sasuke Uchiha was doing pretty much the same thing. Normally, that would have been enough to make him turn tails and run. In this case, he simply crept forward until the 2 of them gave him a quiet gesture and told him with signs to have a look, and so he did. Shinku Harano was squirming uncomfortably on the bench in the gym, while Naruko herself had fallen asleep on his lap and was currently drooling all over his knees. There was that sort of pleading look on Harano's face that seemed to simply cry out for help, which was probably the reason the 2 near him were enjoying the scene. It was like watching a kitten meowing wide-eyed for milk from a carton box on the side of the road. It was cute, endearing, and in a certain sense, it made him feel horrible for making a light chuckle at the scene. He hoped Umbu wouldn't break the boy further. He really hoped that. No Umbu worth his salt ever squirmed like that. Chapter 50, Unsurprising Reactions. Naruko had her head down at the side of the table, snoring as hard as she could possibly do. Shinku's eyes were wide in surprise since a few minutes before, but now they reached a new level. The dobe really fall asleep only in 2 places, Sasuke grumbled. In here and at my house everywhere else, she just keeps an eye close and the other open, the Uchiha shook his head. And when she does fall asleep, it's not 5 minutes but more like 5 days. Our ramen, Naruko snored. She isn't sick, right? Shinku muttered. Kushina laughed lightly from her spot in the kitchen. Of course not, it's just that my baby's so timid, she's always stressed everywhere else. And you know what they say about a shinobi who sleeps on the job, right? That he's doing a poor one, Sasuke finished with a nod. Unfortunately, only the dobe can stay awake for weeks on her side without any effect. Weeks. Shinku choked out in disbelief. You're lying. It's weeks. She's mostly sane, right? Sasuke retorted. Oh, careful. The next moment, Shinku ended up pulled closer to Sasuke as Naruko delivered a vicious bite on the table where his hand had been a moment before. Ramen. Naruko growled. Yeah, Kushina chuckled good-naturedly, it's coming dear. If there were ramen camps, I'm sure my little girl would be an S-rank threat to them, Minato said with a small smile on his lips. The moment the pot of homemade ramen made its way on the table, Naruko slithered like a sort of half-breed between a giraffe and a snake towards it, before plunging her head inside. Kushina simply brought on the table the second larger pot. Sometimes I wonder if I haven't birthed a boy really, I don't know who she took those table manners from, the red-haired woman grumbled, before starting to serve the dinner. The loud slurping began from Kushina's side of the table in less than a second. Minato made an awkward smile, before calmly starting to eat in silence. Sasuke simply held back a snort, while Shinku ate slowly the warm food. It felt nice. Naruko opened her eyes after her own pot was empty, like a slumbering bear waking up after a lethargic sleep. She licked her lips and gazed around, her eyes vividly taking in everything. Hey, is there any ramen left? You mean, except the entire pot you just scarfed down? Sasuke retorted. Mine, Naruko pouted. Mom? Can I have some more please? Sure, Kushina said. It was comfortable. I'm taking over. Please, do. Shinku finished eating quietly, his eyes firm and gazing around. It was imperceptible, and yet Minato found himself narrowing his own eyes for a brief instant. Dinner ended after a few minutes, and in that warm afterglow, Minato found himself braving his own instinct of self-survival. Haranokan. Concerning that matter with Umbu training, he began, only to find the gazes of everyone else at the table on him. You won't be able to go, he exhaled. Oh, Shinku blinked. All right. What? No way, Nariko pouted, but she did appear visibly pleased with herself. Well, that means it's going to be me and Shin-chan doing missions while Yuki-chan becomes a medic. And then Kakashi and I will get better and we'll. Nariko, I'm breaking up the team, Minato said quietly. Nariko's eyes widened, as her iris trembled lightly. What are you? Sasuke will apprentice under Tsunade, the yondaime said. You'll have to remain in Konoha for the time being, and Shinku, Kakashi pulled enough strings to have you drafted in Umbu. Minato released a shuddering breath. You'll receive training on the field. As of this afternoon we are in a state of war against the land of rice fields and the village of Sound. You'll have to come by tomorrow in the office to receive your mask and your new assignment. Not even a fly buzzed in the kitchen. Nariko just gazed at her father with a look that bordered the agony, as if they had just torn a limb from her. It was the quiet before the storm, as Sasuke's fist slammed on the table hard. Hokage-sama. I demand to enter Umbu. You can't. Dad. Nariko slammed her own fists on the table, actually cracking it in half. Why the hell do you? Look at them. What are you, a kitten sent to the slaughterhouse? Right, kitten have claws, you don't even have those. A half-broken plate flew in midair. Nariko. That's no way to speak to your dad, Tabane. No, I mean. You can't send Shin-chan out there. He barely survives when there's. That's not your. There's no problem if I enter Umbu and. Shinku quietly stood from his chair, gazing at the carnage in front of him. Nariko was pressuring her father, with Sasuke acting as her shoulder. The Hokage on the other hand appeared to be awkwardly waiting for some sort of support to come from his wife, who was doing her best to limit Nariko's swearing, but wasn't otherwise interfering. Shinku did the only thing a proper shinobi could do. He properly bowed to Kushina, who was gazing towards the rambling scene. Thank you for the dinner. He lifted his head and simply walked near his teammates, before tapping them both on the shoulder. It's enough, he said. The Hokage's orders are absolute to the shinobi force. I will come by tomorrow morning then, Hokage-sama. I'll be heading home now, since I have to prepare my stuff for tomorrow. Shin-chan, you don't have tea? It's fine, he interrupted her, really. I mean, I'll be the rookie in a team of Umbu. How bad can that go? He interrupted Sasuke too, just because he felt like it. I'll be fine. What? You think I'm the only one who brushes death so many times? I'm sure there's plenty of shinobi who do just fine. He made an awkward smile. And really, how long can a war go on anyway? I can follow you, however, Sasuke hissed back. There's no reason for me to actually enter the Medic Nin Corps, it's my decision whether to. Yes, it is, Minato acquiesced, but it would be better for your treatment. Treatment? Sasuke asked, gazing at the Hokage. The cursed seal on you is different from those Orochimaru used before, Minato spoke quietly. Left untreated, it will kill you in a matter of months. With Tsunade's skills, she increased your life expectancy to 12 years provided you cooperate with the treatments and learn how to treat yourself too. Nariko had grown deathly quiet at those words, before simply gripping on Shinku and Sasuke's sleeves as if she was a lost child asking for directions. She began to sniffle a moment later. The sniffle became a full-blown cry by the time Sasuke took the cue to hug the girl. Embarrassed out of his wits, Shinku did the same a second later. Nariko was bawling like a toddler, her firm grip changing so that she held both Shinku and Sasuke in her fearsome hold. Shinku nearly choked as the grip intensified. In the end, she was still a kid, wasn't she? Aren't we one too, though? 13 twice makes 26. I say we're older. The cool and cold night of Konoha met him as he stepped outside the Hokage's mansion. He could have stayed to sleep, but all of his stuff was in his apartment and he was already feeling uncomfortable at dinner. When you're done sniffling in a corner like a bawling kid, Inner mumbled, you can take over. Was it always this cold in Konoha? There wasn't a soul hanging around the streets, and the quiet soon mixed with his unruly thoughts. His steps took him on barely seen before streets, until his hands clasped at the key to his meager apartment and he settled in. Thankfully, the room came with a bed and some spare furniture. It also came with his 2 teammates waiting for him. I'm sure I left you 2 behind, he said calmly. Duh, Nariko rolled her eyes. You thought it would be that easy to get rid of me? Shin-chan, she shook her head, you underestimate my rebounding strength. Well, Sasuke grumbled, the average life expectancy of a shinobi is for the mid-40s anyway. I'll live to reach 25. It's enough to find a nice pure loving girl and get married, and there's nothing saying this seal can't be removed eventually. So, Nariko said, her voice now uncertain, the biggest problem is Shin-chan, she nodded. And really, I had even planned for a sleepover at my house, she pouted. It was going to have pajamas and ramen and us dyeing each other's hair. Is that how sleepovers usually go? Shinku asked, warily taking a seat at the table. I don't have tea, so. Duh, Nariko rolled her eyes. That's why I sent a clone to get something. Prophetically, said clone appeared in a rush with a handful of cans, a few packets of snacks and a large overly fluffy pillow. Said pillow revealed itself as a sort of comfortable chair, because Nariko hopped in it a moment later and stretched lazily. Nariko's eyes drifted to his bed desk, where now that he looked at it someone had placed the team picture. Here, the girl rummaged through her pockets, before taking out a set of scrolls. Ramen supplies for downtrodden periods, she patted a scroll, extra kunao and shuriken, because you never know, she patted the second, clean underwear, she sniffled at the third one. I am not going to ask how or why you have male underwear, Shinku muttered, shaking his head in disbelief. I'm really not going to ask. And these 2, Nariko took out the pants of his uniform, I wrote the storage seals in the inner pockets, so now you can store the scrolls in there and puff them out one at a time to make that funny joke about being happy to see someone and. She sniffled. I've already cried before, I don't do tears. I'm the awesome Kunoichi Nariko Namikaze and I don't do tears. All right. Shinku said awkwardly. So, you don't need a tissue. Nariko proceeded to blow her nose with a tissue Sasuke offered her. I've got some hay fever. Well, Sasuke grumbled. If things get tough out there, you just let me know and I'll kick up a storm. The Uchiha crossed his arms in front of his chest. I'm not the heir of the Uchiha clan for nothing, he puffed his chest and raised his chin up high, I'll use my political weight if I have to. Nariko snorted. Because you have weight? You sure it's not the duck butt hair weighing you down? Shut up you, what shinobi sane of his mind would go around with ponytails? Hey. They're awesome. Nariko gripped at them, and there are at least 29 different sexual acts you can do with ponytails. Shinku sputtered, nearly choking on his saliva as he thumped his chest. Shin-chan's too innocent, Nariko giggled. How am I going to survive without the means to tease him? I know, she clapped her hands. You've got to write to us. You can send the letter to the Hokage's mansion, and I'll read it first before handing it over to Yuki-chan. Knowing you, you'd forge a fake letter, Sasuke retorted. I would never. Shinku's lips twitched in a smile. There was no way he could remain depressed, there was no way he could cry. His 2 friends were overbearing mother hens with overly powerful techniques, bloodlines, and abilities. They were leagues away from him, probably centuries of training ahead, but even then they were still his friends, and he was theirs. Probably literally in Nariko's opinion who appeared extremely possessive of whoever entered her circle of confidence. They did have their quirks and their own problems, but in some things, he had been better off training at 5, really, who would ever do that to a kid? Oh right. Shin-chan I've got to ask, Nariko said, what's up with that red dot of yours? I thought it was a blood stain or something, but it's still there. I didn't tell you. Tell what? Nariko inclined her head to the side. This is a flesh-eating bug, he said simply, well, it's actually fooze, it remains red as long as she's alive. She gave it to me and with it, she can sense where I am, at least, That's what she said. Oh. Like a red string of fate. Nariko said with a soft and half-romantic voice. That's so. There was a small drip sound. Suzuki's noise was dribbling blood. Such budding love brought forth and kept apart. Suzuki's voice seemed to change inflection as he closed his eyes, sparkles appearing around his face. Oh, what tender thing I have seen, such grace and love so frail, I'm bequeathed by the purity of. Nariko slammed a fist against Suzuki's head, sending the boy to twitch on the ground. Sorry, Nariko chuckled, sometimes Yuki-chan does that. Do you always have to hit that hard, dope? Suzuki snarled. One day you're going to break my skull. I know you want me to break your ass, but that's not going to happen, Nariko replied with a bright smile. You reap what you sow. They drank tea. They ate snacks. They talked about how Shinka wasn't supposed to pop his cherry with a whore. They sang, they cried, Nariko slipped the sake somewhere in the middle of a kin and they drunkenly started singing again completely off-pitched. The next morning, Shinka woke up entangled in a mass of limbs. He blearily managed to stand, disentangling himself and waking up the rest of his teammates in the process. He trudged half-heartedly to the bathroom, before getting ready for departure. By the time he stepped out of the apartment, both Suzuki and Nariko were flanking him. He really felt out of place, especially when the people began to stare and talk. Who's that guy near my Nariko-tan? That's the bastard who was overly familiar with my Suzuki-sama. You think he's their teammate? Wasn't it Shiku something, the Harano's son? You mean the son of Kaizushi? Poor bloke died in the siege. His own shop crushed him. It was then, just as he was about to step inside the Hokage tower, that a small voice called to him. Hey! Shinobi-san. He turned, raising an eyebrow at the sight of a kid running closer to him. Yes. The boy looked familiar, but he couldn't quite place him. Thank you for saving my life. The kid bowed. My pops said I should thank ya if I saw you. The child looked up towards him with sparkles in his eyes. Sparkles? What? What? What was going on? Wounded kid. Siege. Oh, Shinku blinked. I'm glad you're better now, he smiled lightly. I really didn't do much. Dad said I have to thank you and so I did. Yeah, saved my life, yeah did. Shin-chan's hobby is saving people, Nariko said then with a smirk, but he's really shy about that, so don't spread it around too much. Hi, Ba-chan. A nervous tick mark appeared on Nariko's forehead. Who did you call an auntie now? The boy scampered away in a hurry, waving goodbye to Shinka who half-awkwardly returned it. Someone's got an admirer, Suzuki's lips twitched upwards. Maybe I can hand over some of my fangirls to you, Shinku. Listen, how about you start wearing a wig and... Denied, Shinka retorted quickly. I still remember that story about the underwear. Damn, Suzuki grumbled. Fine, leave me to my hell. He received 2 pats on the back the moment he stepped on the stairway. Well. Nariko sniffled, remember to write, Shin-chan. And don't you dare corrupt my pure love story. Suzuki said. Shinku snorted. See you. 5 years later. How long does a war last? Shinku grumbled, hissing in pain as the barbed wire hastily broke to allow for a small hole. He gestured with 2 sharp motions to Baku, who sent back to him a call sign for the all clear from his spot on the tree. Funny you ask me, he hissed as he patted Cat on the back, letting the thin man go first. He disappeared in the mud beyond the barbed wire, carefully exploring for tags or traps. All clear, the radio in his ear buzzed. He gave the thumb up to Baku, who relayed the call sign back beyond the trees. There was a flicker, and soon dog and wolf passed through the hole in the fence. So this is the last one. A meek voice murmured close to him. Unless Orochimaru built others, Shinku retorted. This is the furthest one north however, he gazed at the dragon mask near him. The girl was the team's new rookie. Just as he had been, 5 years before, now it was someone else's turn to be the water food package carrier. Keep sharp, Wolf's voice came through the radio, gruff and stern. There are signs of movement in here. Fresh ones, Dog added softly, radio silence. Umbu teamwork was flexible. Unless there was a captain, which wasn't the case, every member of the team gave orders, except the rookie, who only followed them. The teams formed around the concept that each member knew what he was doing in his area of expertise, and thus had the right to lead depending on the situation. Dog and Wolf were the infiltration specialists. Baku and Cat were the scouts. He was the team's, much to his own surprise. Punch and Dragon was the rookie. She also was the team's medic alongside with Cat. Baku gestured at him and he gave a negative, looking towards Dragon. Baku made other gestures and Shinku caved in, giving a nod. "You keep your head down," he muttered to Dragon. "Look towards Baku, he'll warn you if something is coming." "I'm going in." "Ah, why yes." The girl stuttered. It was sort of endearing in a certain way. He had stopped stuttering years before. Blood. His nose breathed in the iron-rich scent as he crawled through the space in the fence. Following the small signs left behind by Cat, he walked the safe line all the way towards the entrance of the complex. A massive bronze door dug deep into the ground, now half open. He pushed his back against it, peeking inside. There was silence. He took a step forward, and then another. Quickly, Shinku jumped to the ceiling of the hallway and began to crawl forward. The air was stale. "You ever think our old teammates have to do this sort of crap?" He could imagine Inner with his arms crossed in a sneer over his face, as he floated in the middle of his sand-soaked desert of a mindscape. Near him, a shackled and bound figure stood quiet. "I don't know. We stopped receiving letters from back home. Just like we never got an answer from Fu Stop." Shinku stilled. The sound of heavy breathing reached his ears. A door creaked open, revealing a black-haired man holding onto the side of his head and moaning in pain. Half of his body grotesquely mutated, blood seemed to be dripping down his mouth. Shinku clasped a kunao. "Inner. I got this." His eyes narrowed, the lips behind his mask became cruel as they twitched in a smirk. The grip on the kunao hardened as he flexed his legs. The Kirigaku or kunao was soon in his other hand. Shinku might have preferred the Konoha variant, but he was more of a stabbing person. He jumped down without making a sound. The kunao stabbed straight at the base of the neck, slicing its way through the spine and cutting it in half as it went. The man was dead before he reached the end of his back. Blood sprayed over his uniform, coloring his mask of red. "There are people in here," he whispered, breaking the radio silence to warn the others. "Understood, Bird," Wolf replied. "Uphold the radio silence." Shinku didn't reply. He just wiped away the blood from his mask with a quick flick, before returning to the ceiling. His code name was Bird. He was the assassination specialist. He was Umbu. Check the description for the links to the author.